temperatures climbing up to 29 degrees. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could become the next giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt just a lot nicer. We went out for dinner, just enter. And you never expect to win, but I did.
Get your entry in now. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock on Saturday the 10th of August. This is The Weekend on GB News. King Charles has called for unity and praised the community spirit that countered the riots over the last week. It comes as the policing minister warns there is intelligence more protests could happen today. Across the pond, the race for the White House continues, with polls nationally and in battleground states showing Kamala Harris building a lead or catching Donald Trump. We're asking who will be the next president. And Algerian boxer Amain Khalif clinches Olympic gold, hitting back at critics saying, "I am a woman. Should she have been allowed to compete in the first place?" I'm Darren Grimes, and The Weekend starts here. This show is nothing without you and your views. Let me know your thoughts on all of the stories we'll be discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/yoursay and join the conversation there. Now, keeping me company this hour is former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, and leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. But before we get stuck into today's stories, here's the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. King Charles has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country, speaking out for the first time since the unrest began. He thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace and welcomed how communities have countered the violence. This comes after Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said the police should remain on high alert going into the weekend despite the violence easing. Police forces across the UK are on standby over the weekend, with Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds saying the government is in a state of high readiness for the prospect of further disorder. Thousands of officers will be on duty as the Met continues to support and reassure communities. Teams are also visiting faith and community venues in their local areas to listen to the concerns of residents and provide reassurance. Around 741 people have now been arrested over rioting. That's according to the National Police Chiefs Council, of which over 300 have been charged. Merseyside Police says 2 more people have been charged following violent disorder in Southport and Liverpool, bringing the total number of people charged there to 24. A senior police service of Northern Ireland officers says there will be a significant visible policing operation in place ahead of a planned anti-immigration protest and counter-protest in Belfast. Assistant Chief Constable Melanie Jones says the police are expecting a very busy weekend for policing across Northern Ireland, with a risk of spontaneous protest. Around 1,000 people gathered in Belfast for a counter-protest against several hundred anti-immigration demonstrators last night. Police responded to several race-related hate crime incidents and other disorder on Thursday night in what the police said was the 5th night of disorder that officers have dealt with. In other news, the funeral for British teenager Jay Slater, who died whilst on holiday in Tenerife, is being held today. Well-wishers who attend the service have been asked to wear something blue in his memory. A post-mortem examination found the 19-year-old died of traumatic head injuries consistent with a fall from height. The Spanish Civil Guard said Mr. Slater could have fallen in the steep and inaccessible area where he was discovered. An investigation has now been launched after a plane crashed in the state of Sao Paulo in Brazil, killing all 61 people on board. The black box was found late last night. There were 57 passengers and 4 crew members on board that flight. And if you're watching us on television, you'll see the dramatic footage of the plane spiralling out of control and crashing through trees, eventually ending in a large plume of smoke. Elsewhere, dozens of people have been killed in a strike that targeted a school-turned-shelter in Gaza City. That's according to the Palestinian health officials. According to Gaza's Civil Defense Agency, more than 100 people have been killed, with dozens more injured. Israel's military said it struck the location yesterday, describing its target as a Hamas command center embedded in the school. Former President Donald Trump arrived to address the Republican masses at a rally in Montana this morning. The Republican nominee arrived at Bozeman, Montana, after his plane was reportedly diverted to a different airport due to a mechanical issue. This comes after Trump yesterday spent nearly an hour at his Mar-a-Lago home in Florida addressing a select group of reporters, claiming that America was in the most dangerous position it's ever been in. He also called Vice President Kamala Harris a radical left person.
Is grossly incompetent and, in my opinion, has a very low IQ. But we'll find out about her IQ during the debate, okay? Let's find out about her IQ.
And in sport, the men's Team GB 400-metre relay team has come away with bronze at the Paris Olympics. The quartet of Great Britain's Zarnell Hughes, Nathaniel Mitchell-Blake, Louis Hinchcliffe and Jeremiah Azu finishing strong at that final in Paris in the 4x100. And that is, of course, after the women's relay team won silver in the same event. Team GB's Nathaniel Mitchell-Blake spoke to reporters after that victory and praised his teammate Zarnell.
It's been an enjoyable experience to kind of just learn from each other and go through this process together. So I think that makes it even more special. He's the fastest man in British history. So having him as a part of our quartet will always bode well with us and always give us an opportunity to elevate the possibility of success. And for him to put his health literally on the line for all of us to achieve a medal. We're very grateful for that.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks very much, Tatiana. Let's get stuck into today's topics. Now, King Charles has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country, speaking out for the first time since the unrest began. He thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace across the country. And he welcomed how communities have actually countered the violence. Now, this comes after the Prime Minister said that police forces across the country should remain on high alert going into the weekend, despite an apparent easing of violence. Well, joining me now is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, the King doing this now, this in 2011 when we had the riots, Her Majesty, our late Queen, Her Majesty the Queen, she did not make an intervention. So just how significant is this?
Well, it can be seen as quite significant. I mean, on the face of it, King Charles's comments are relatively innocuous, even banal. He thanks and praises the emergency services, and he talks about the communities that have countered the violence. But look a little deeper, and that last bit is actually quite controversial. The communities which countered the violence, presumably by that he means the counter-protesters who turned out on the streets to hit back at the protesters. Well, those counter-protesters in themselves are seen by some as quite controversial. For example, there were cries of "from the river to the sea," a phrase which is very, very offensive to many Jewish Londoners, being shouted over and over again at lots and lots of these counter-protests. There's also the story of that Labour councillor who's now been suspended by the Labour Party for suggesting that the throats of far-right protesters should be cut. Now, the fact that King Charles appears to be praising the communities and perhaps even the counter-protesters can be seen as quite controversial in itself. It's probably very helpful to Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer's solution to these riots from the beginning has been to basically put as many of these people as possible into prison. It hasn't really been about focusing on the root cause of the protest. But it'll be really interesting to see how that statement from King Charles, plays out over the next couple of weeks. What will Conservative politicians, for example, make of it all?
Now, of course, Olivia, the monarch could well be reacting to advice from the Prime Minister. What are we hearing in that regard?
Well, that is the really big question. How much was Keir Starmer involved in this statement from the palace? It's possible that the King and Buckingham Palace drafted the statement with no conversation with the Prime Minister. That said, I would have thought that normally with statements like this, they are in a routine way passed by the Prime Minister beforehand. If Conservative MPs believe that the King and the Prime Minister are sort of working in cahoots over this, I think that is probably a bit of a stretch too far, but I'm sure we would hear about it in the coming days and weeks.
All right, Olivia Utley there, fabulous as ever. That's Olivia Utley, our political correspondent. Let's see, though, what our panel makes of this. We've got the former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, and leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. Hello to both of you. Now, James, I'll start with you, because one of our viewers, Mark, says the King is simply a puppet of the Prime Minister because he would not have been allowed to say what he said without the approval of Sir Keir Starmer. Do you think this has come from high command?
I don't think so. I mean, of course, I don't know, and none of us really know what goes on in the conversations between the Prime Minister and the monarch, but I wouldn't have thought so. What he said, which to me seems very good and decent. The scenes that we saw of violence across the country were absolutely shocking, of racist violence were absolutely shocking. And the scenes we saw of communities coming together to look after each other, to repair damage and to stand in solidarity with one another were extremely heartening, and that it should be what our country is really about. It seems quite in keeping with the message that Charles gave in his first message in what's it called that happens on Christmas Day, the speech, which was about bringing communities together, support for public sector workers and for our shared institutions. And to me, that seems like the right sort of message that should be coming from the top of our society at this time, after, you know, we've seen really very shocking scenes which have frightened many, many people. And the main message I think that we should all be taking is that these do not represent the basic fabric of our country, which wants to work together.
Well, David, speaking of the fabric of this country, I would argue that that fabric has never been picked at more, and that actually the seams are starting to fall off said fabric. And I view it potentially as a mistake for the monarch to be given a statement at this time, because I do think that we are thoroughly disunited.
Well, yeah, the king is responsible for his own words, and what he said obviously comes from him and will be seen to have come from him. And on one level, it's a nice statement calling for unity, praising communities and so on. But like you said, people will read into this, and this doesn't address the underlying issues, the underlying tensions that are there in the country, which was sparked off by the murder of 3 English girls in Southport, and that doesn't seem to be addressed. And there's a lot of people in this country who are really, really concerned about rising crime, specifically crime that is associated with migrant communities. And that's not to disparage everyone who is a migrant to this country, but there certainly are things that are happening now which seem to be on the increase. And people who address or speak about this and just express concerns about the rapid mass immigration that we've had over the last 30 years or more, which is changing the way that England feels, are continually disparaged and disdained. And that's not being addressed.
And what would you have liked to have heard from Sir Keir Starmer then? Because obviously he's given a series of press conferences throughout this period. And actually, I'm wondering whether or not they actually reach out to people to say, we hear your concerns, we're going to do something about it. Instead, it seems to have been quite the opposite.
It's completely the opposite. I mean, he went up to Southport the day after the murders had happened with some flowers, put them down, didn't even speak to the people in the community, and he just looked like someone who didn't care, who's going through this playbook that always happens after a migrant crime event, where they lay flowers and then they say, oh, we're going to protect minority communities because they're the ones who are really in danger, never mind the people who were killed, who were English children. And then they have a church service, ring some bells and sing Don't Look Back in Anger, and then they kill the story and don't talk about it again. And that seemed to be what he was doing. And I think that angered people, because he could have put a lid on it by saying, we understand your concerns and we're going to do something to keep you safe in your communities.
I mean, James, where are you at on that then? Because, you know, there has been a lot of pushback to comments that he's made, with some actually accusing the Prime Minister of pouring petrol on the flames.
The root causes of the violence that we have seen is the intense racism and anti-Muslim feeling of a small minority in our country. Well, let's go back to what actually happened.
Well, hang on, I have to take you up on that. I have to, wait. You can't call everyone who is out...
We're talking about the root causes. You were saying not dealing with the root causes. I'm talking about the root causes. I said the root causes are the intense racism and violent anti-Muslim feeling from a small minority in our country. Now, what actually happened in Southport?
I can guarantee you that that's not the case.
I'm talking. You're not listening to me, Darren. You're not, Darren. You're not listening to me because no, I'm not, Darren. The reason why I'm not, and the reason why you're not listening to me, is that's not what I said. I said that the root cause of attacks against a mosque in Southport, that some people, some far-right activists and some racists went and attacked the mosque in Southport. The root cause of that is the racism of those people, which I'm saying is a small minority, and actually agreeing with the King does not represent the vast, vast majority of people. You know, when I look at, when you're scrolling miserably on social media, seeing the scenes we're seeing, people being dragged out of their car because of the colour of their skin, that does not represent our country, and the root causes of that are racism. And the things that do represent our country are, for example, when there were people walking to prayers in Accrington and people came out of the mosque and were hugging people and saying respect, and you were seeing the unity of people coming together there. That's what represents our country. The root causes are disunity and drummed up racism and drummed up feelings against Muslims and against minorities, which are wrong. That's the root cause, and that's what we should all be standing against.
Well, I mean, we've got lefty councillors at these so-called anti-racist protesters calling for throats to be cut. So, I mean, it's not all that harmonious, is it?
Not at all. I mean, there are hooligans, and I despise them. And there are also...
No, I've not heard anyone, certainly not on this channel, no one condones what has happened, right? That's the... But you have to give that caveat every 2 seconds.
You have to allow people to protest, and what's happening here is we've got two-tier policing, a two-tier society where the counter-protests, which seem to be very, very organised with placards up, professionally made, with stand-up to racism banners in advance, they are celebrated and they are lauded by the state. But the people who want to go and protest about mass immigration, about two-tier policing, about migrant crime or rising levels of criminality seem to be suppressed.
Targeting hotels.
You've got in Birmingham, you've got white people being targeted as well.
Targeting
we can see
hotels that house migrants is not protesting against a political issue. It is a racially motivated anti-migrant attack. Yes, of course, we should all praise the thousands of ordinary people who came out to defend these places and these people, and that meant that this small minority who you say you condemn, the racist violence, that they had to go home, that they weren't able to enact their hatred and their division in our society. And that is the thing that is picking apart at the seams of our society.
In that instance, you do have to question what was going on, because this has been widely spoken about. The police knew about this 48 hours in advance, and they didn't cordon off the area at all.
The police knew about what, sorry?
The attack on the migrant hotel in Rotherham. Yeah. So you've got a question there, what's happening?
There could well have been very bad police failures. I agree. The police should have been there.
So we have two-tier policing here going on, and
the two-tier policing, they weren't protecting the hotel. The two-tier thing is an absolute nonsense.
I promise we'll come back. We'll come back to this because there's plenty to talk about. We could go on all day. But thank you very much there to James Snyder and David Curtin. Now, folks, for all the best analysis and opinion on those stories and more, you can go to our website, gbnews.com. Now, the race for the White House continues with polls nationally and in battleground states showing that Kamala Harris is building a lead or catching up to Donald Trump. More on that after the break.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Karen Stevenson was born in Stoke-on-Trent and read music at Trinity College, Cambridge. She's played cello with many of the world's great orchestras under the batons of some of the most renowned conductors, and she joins me now to discuss her career and the importance of music in education. Tell me about that. What is your role at the Philharmonia?
My role at the Philharmonia is number 2 cello. I've been there for about 15 years. Sometimes I play number 1 cello as well, which is a great opportunity for me.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I often think what a very difficult life it is to be a professional musician.
I make a living out of it. It is definitely possible. Yeah, we don't really like it when we get into a taxi and someone says, "What's your day job?" Because we work really hard.
I was kind of making the opposite point. Not that you'd also have a day job. I think the perfection that is required for a professional musician is extraordinary. On the whole, we are intolerant of mistakes in classical music.
Yes, we are.
And I just wondered whether you don't become very frustrated with a world in which everything else is imperfect.
You are only as good as your last concert, Michael. That's how it feels. It is a lot of pressure. Sometimes we will say, OK, a pint for every wrong note or something, but depending on the piece of music, that could be quite dangerous.
How many hours a day do you have to practice?
You have to practice much more when you're younger, I think, when you're learning. I think this is really important. And when you're at music college, I'm a busy, I'm travelling, I have a family. I can't practice as much as I used to, so you have to rely on your experience. What I really wanted to say is that there's been a lot of fear-mongering about classical music being in decline and it not being relevant. And I really wanted to say that I don't think that's the case. Our audiences have increased. They're the highest they've been in 10 years.
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
A very warm welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Now, a senior police officer in Northern Ireland says there will be a significant visible policing operation in place ahead of a planned anti-immigration protest and counter-protest in Belfast. Leeds heads up there now, and we're going to go to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, I can hear it. It sounds like it's kicking off, is it?
No, definitely not. There's a very, very light police protest here because the anti-immigration protest that was due to happen here happened yesterday. So, but actually that's quite strange because when you look at these pro-immigration protests, they're headed up by the trade unions. They're assembling down in Writers Square now, going to make their way up to the City Hall. And these trade unions, I mean, yesterday this protest came during working hours and there was signs up on Facebook all over the place, public records offices closed, etc. And this very well financed anti-immigration or pro-immigration protesters arrived up all in their yellow bibs. They're obviously being paid for being here because they've took the time off work. And if you just look out behind us now, there's a huge stage here that'll cost thousands of pounds, and that's for those public sector workers to protest against the anti-immigration protesters. And really, Darren, I listened to your panel just before. I have been covering this on the ground for 2 years in the Republic of Ireland, and they are not getting what is happening.
No.
The Republic of Ireland has had more immigrants per head of population than Britain. They're about a year ahead now of where we are. And you see tented villages along the canals. You see the shopkeepers on that side that are not racists. But women are not coming into their shops, so they are closing. They're not racists. I have spoke to many working class areas here in Belfast who have took the majority of undocumented immigrants coming into their area because housing there, social housing, is owned by private landlords, including the hotels and stuff, and they hand them over to a group called Mears, and Mears then make sure that immigrants have housing in those areas. But the problem with that, of course, is those private landlords are no longer in the social housing bubble. And I've spoke to children or women here who have bought their houses in those areas, so they're by no means working class people who are just claiming the dole or whatever, but they only have one car. And they're having to put their children to schools 3 miles away because there is places set aside in those schools for immigrant children. There is families here who have grown up in those areas and need the family support because their jobs they have just about lets them pay the mortgage, just about lets them run a car, and they depend on their parents that live in the same area. Those people are not racists by any stretch of the imagination. But they are
I completely agree with you
about what is happening to our society.
Thank you for saying that, because I imagine there are a lot of viewers at home right now that were screaming at their television that I completely agree with you, but that's why we have the debate on this channel. But Doogie, how significant was it, the scenes that we saw on social media and all the rest, where you've got the Ulster banner flying alongside the Irish tricolour? It was astonishing, wasn't it, to see both sets of protesters actually for the same cause?
Well, that hasn't happened really since 1798 with the United Irishmen. And really what you see here is those working class areas coming together north and south of the border and challenging the political establishment, saying we don't mind immigrants, but not too many, please, because we haven't got the services to deal with what we already have. And strangely yesterday, Sinn Féin, which is the largest party in Ireland, but not yet enough to form a government in the Republic of Ireland, their voting base would be in those working class areas. And yesterday they were standing alongside the trade unions behind me here, and they were supporting immigration into Northern Ireland. And because they're an All-Ireland party, well, they're actually supporting immigration into the Republic of Ireland. And that is strange when you look that the general election in the Republic of Ireland will be sometime before February, although I think it will probably come in November. And it will be strange to see, or interesting to see, will that voter base now turn out for Sinn Féin? And many of those people that arrived here last week were viciously attacked on Twitter or X for daring to come up and support people of the working classes in Northern Ireland.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to Sinn Féin actually now, because of course they were looking like they were going to win on both sides of the border at one point. But Doogie, thank you very much for your time as ever. That's our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie there. We'll come back to him later in the show. Right, let's go back to our panel now. We've got the former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, and the leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. I have to ask you what you thought of that, because, James, what gets me is that Doogie has stood there in front of a massive stage that's being well funded by a group of public sector activists who want to denigrate and belittle people and frankly smear them as being fascists and racists when they're absolutely not. Public services rather are creaking at the seams. We have never seen levels of migration this high. It isn't racist to turn around and say we cannot go on like this, and frankly I don't want to watch my community change into something that is thoroughly unrecognisable, which has happened in large parts of the country.
So I don't think that the trade unions, I don't know the details of what's going on in Belfast, but I have seen what the Posties Union have done, what the Railway Workers Union have done, what the Fire Brigades Union have done, which is to promote working class unity, which means standing against those who wish to divide the working class and divide the country through racism. So that's why the RMT and the FBU and the CWU instructed their branches to go and provide support for mosques where that was needed, because, yes, all of those issues which Doogie raised, public services squeezed, housing unavailable and expensive, problems with schooling, limited living standards, pay not meeting the mortgage and meeting the rent, insufficient childcare, all of these issues are issues that for us to overcome them and improve them, we're going to need unity, and the unity which realises that someone who is, for example, born in Jamaica and is a bricklayer has much more in common with another working class person who was perhaps born here than they do with the people that are cutting their services, who are getting the enormous tax breaks, who are taking money out of our public services, who are privatising them. That is the real unity that we need to see. So I don't think that the trade unions and those that are standing against racism, what they're doing is they're not denigrating sections of people who have bad services, bad pay, bad jobs, bad housing. They're standing with them fundamentally to have a unity which can take on the people that are really in charge in our country and are really running it into the ground and have been for 40 years.
Well,
which is your
party is in charge,
which is
right now.
Well, I'm actually not a member of the Labour Party.
Well, you were.
And Labour have been in charge for about 3 minutes.
1 month, and they've done a fine job of it in that time, haven't they?
And in that time, they've cut the winter fuel allowance for 10 million pensioners. So they're the party that's making poorer people poorer at the moment.
But on that point, you know, David, if you ask me, it's been a long time since the trade unions actually did represent the working class, because I know a lot of people have been writing into me in my inbox. I know people that work in educational institutions in this country, and they get union letters from their union saying we must campaign against these racist protests and all the rest of it, dismissing entirely all of their concerns. The trade unions do not represent the working class people of this country.
Absolutely
and I
not.
don't think it's
If I could have a go now.
Yes.
What was good about the report there is the language that Dougie used there. They were not racists and then anti-racists, as other people have said. These are people who are against mass migration. And then on the other hand, the counter-protests were more accurately called pro-mass immigration protests. And that is the dividing line here. And it's good that he actually called them out for what they actually are. The trade unions, as you say, have been on the side of all these far-left policies and agendas, mass immigration, transgenderism, and many, many other things that you might call woke and so on. But, you know, what we got here in Northern Ireland is a community that up until a couple of years ago was very, very homogenous. And now they're rapidly seeing the changes that have happened more gradually in England over 40 years. They're seeing them happening just in the flash of an eye now, and it's very disconcerting to people there. And as you say, this is causing all kinds of problems in the availability of services, the availability of housing, and people aren't racist. They just don't want a rapid change in their communities, in the availability of services, and also in the culture of their country. And that's an absolutely legitimate thing to go out and say.
All right, we'll come back to that because we're going to protesters gathering in Manchester for a Stand Up to Racism rally. And these are live pictures coming in now as hundreds of people march with their banners. Now, similar protests are happening today in London, and we'll be live outside of the Home Office after your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you. The top stories. King Charles has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country, speaking out for the first time since the unrest began. He thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace and welcomed how communities have countered the violence. This comes after Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said the police should remain on high alert going into this weekend despite the violence easing. And as you've been hearing, police forces across the UK are on standby over the weekend, with Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds saying the government is in a state of high readiness for the prospect of further disorder. Around 741 people have now been arrested over rioting, according to the National Police Chiefs Council. Merseyside Police says 2 more people have been charged following violent disorder in Southport and Liverpool, bringing the total number of people charged there to 24. They have announced this hour a Section 60 order has been introduced in Liverpool city centre for 12 hours following the violence and disorder seen last week. A senior police service of Northern Ireland officers says there will be a significant visible policing operation in place ahead of a planned anti-immigration protest and counter-protest in Belfast. Assistant Chief Constable Melanie Jones says the police are expecting a very busy weekend for policing across Northern Ireland with a risk of spontaneous protest. Around 1,000 people gathered in Belfast for a counter-protest against several hundred anti-immigration demonstrators last night. The funeral for British teenager Jay Slater, who died whilst on holiday in Tenerife, is being held today. Well-wishers who attend the service have been asked to wear something blue in his memory. A post-mortem examination found the 19-year-old died of traumatic head injuries consistent with a fall from height. The Spanish Civil Guard said Mr. Slater could have fallen in the steep and inaccessible area where he was discovered. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Cloudy for some in the south, but brighter in the north before turning hot and humid Sunday and into Monday. But having a look at the bigger picture, we've got this waving feature, and that's responsible for the cloud and outbreaks of rain that we'll see in the south today. A bit of a squeeze in the isobars further towards the north. So a lot of cloud compared to yesterday, especially across parts of Wales, the Midlands and down towards the south. Perhaps thick enough for some some spots of rain and drizzle. But in the north, best of the sunshine here with sunny spells. Still a few showers coming into Scotland, but these moving through quite quickly in a brisk wind. Highs here of 20 degrees, but further south 24 to 25. Now, as we go into the latter half of the day, clouds should melt away, so we'll start seeing some late evening sunshine across parts of Wales and the Midlands, but holding on to a lot of cloud further towards the south. Still sunny spells into the evening across Northern Ireland, Northern England, and holding on to a few showers across parts of Scotland still, but like I said, they're moving through quite quickly. So through Saturday evening and into the night, that cloud still persisting across the southern parts of England, so a murky night here and also quite humid and muggy as well. Elsewhere, clearer skies developing widely, showers generally fading across much of Scotland and actually feeling quite fresh underneath the clear skies, especially in the rural spots further towards the north. But underneath this cloud and murky conditions, a humid feel, temperatures 16 or 17 degrees. So as we start Sunday morning then, a lot of clouds still persisting across the south, but as we go into the afternoon, that should start breaking up to reveal sunny spells, and for the majority of the UK, plenty of warm and hot sunshine on offer, with temperatures climbing up to 29 degrees. Bye-bye.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Now today, dozens of anti-racism rallies are being held across the United Kingdom. We're going to let you see Manchester playing out right now. Now hundreds of people are gathered for a Stand Up to Racism march. It says protesters are expected to hold a Stop the Far Right demonstration outside the London headquarters of Nigel Farage's Reform Party in London. So you can see those pictures there, crowds gathered. Now, what we found out during the protests just the other day was that Hope Not Hate, which is a charitable organisation, had said, openly admitted that it was a hoax that the far right would all be gathering in their masses, with a reported 100 protests taking place up and down the country. That simply didn't materialise. So, you know, there seems to be a lot of confusion going on here, a lot of speculation, and not much in the way of actual far-right thuggery that on the street there right now. I mean, I can't see anything being lit on fire.
There's nothing there, is there?
No. So I wonder if they're being had once again, but we shall see, because there are, as we said earlier, a fair few protests going on in the country right now. We're joined now, though, by the national reporter Charlie Peters of GB News, and he is not in Manchester. He's going to give us the latest outside of the Home Office. Charlie, is that a damp squib as well?
Well, we're expecting a protest later this afternoon in central London, as you mentioned, Stand Up to Racism, putting on several events across the country today. That protest in Manchester you just showed some pictures of, but also in Birmingham and in Edinburgh and in Newcastle, where in the last half hour or so there have been a couple of arrests by Northumbria police. Now, they introduced a special legal order in Newcastle city centre earlier today, giving police there additional powers for stop and search, but also also to detain anyone who was covering their faces. A core part of so many of these protests and demonstrations over the last fortnight or so has been people wearing masks, and Northumbria police, acting, we understand, on some intelligence there, have arrested at least one person for wearing a mask in the last half hour. There is a anti-immigration protest taking place in Newcastle, but it is significantly outnumbered by the Stand Up to Racism march, with their placards also present. And that's the same thing that happened yesterday in Crawley, south of London, where there was about 4 or 5 anti-immigration protesters gathering outside of a hotel, swamped by about 300 counter-demonstrators. Again, Stand Up to Racism were part of that procedure. And that comes as you said, Darren, there was that fear of significant protests on Wednesday. That never occurred, but tens of thousands are reported to have taken to the streets across England that night from so-called counter-demonstrators, again mostly linked to Stand Up to Racism, that campaign group. Now, in the morning after that, Sir Mark Rowley said that that was a display of unity from our communities. That comment has been slightly rebuked by the Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds, who said that he didn't want to encourage any protesting because it's hard enough for the police to deal with one side of protests, particularly if they are potentially going to be whipped up into violent disorder. But if they're dealing with two separate sides, that changes the whole policing operation. I saw it myself on Wednesday evening in Aldershot, where a Stand Up to Racism protest came in from outside of town, and then locals turned up to demonstrate against it. They weren't really even organised protesters, those opposing Stand Up to Racism. They just sort of appeared from the wider local area. So at the moment, the police are dealing with those concerns that any sort of demonstration could be matched or met with an opposing protesting force. They've arrested over 740 people linked with disorder now since these started on that Tuesday evening after the Southport killings. Over 300 charges, most of them for violent disorder, but also for attacking emergency workers, some online offences and some possession of weapons. And just one further case I want to bring you quickly. A wife of a Tory councillor, Lucy Connolly, is going to be appearing at Nottingham Magistrates Court later today on charges of stirring up racial hatred online. That's a public order offence relating to alleged posts where she called for people to burn down hotels. So lots of protests today, lots of charges. The police dealing with a nervy Britain today.
All right, Charlie, one brief one before I let you go. A lot of people are saying this looks all very expensive, you know, all these protests going on throughout the country, and they're all flying these Palestinian flags that are being handed out like sort of confetti at a wedding. What's going on there?
Expensive protests in terms of the protesters. I'm not sure about that, but I do know that there's a lot of public concern about the cost of dealing with the policing operation. The criminal justice operation of dealing with anyone who gets arrested is a concern. As you said, as we've covered kind of relentlessly on the channel, we don't have many cells spare in the prison estate at the moment. They're freeing up additional cells, but the Ministry of Justice confirmed yesterday that they need to, they're going to be releasing some of the people they arrest on these disorder charges 40% of the way through their sentence. That's a new measure they've brought in. So some of the people being charged at the moment and sentenced for these riots could soon be released.
All right, Charlie Peters there, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for all of the latest there. Now let's get the final thoughts from the panel today. Former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, and leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. Now, James, how do you why is it that the Palestinian flag, do you think, has become a sort of proxy of what's going on right now, with people flying it at the anti-racism rallies and on even pride marches and things like that? How's it become this sort of symbol of progressive causes, I guess?
I think it's become a symbol for justice, because people who are flying the Palestinian flag are opposing the terrible crimes that have been done to the Palestinian people. I do just want to make another point, because I think people in this country, all of us, we're being really royally mugged off at the moment, because housing is completely is unaffordable and is bad quality. And why is that? It's because social housing, council housing is being sold off and rents are soaring away. Our public services are on their knees. Why is that? because we've had 14 years of cuts to public services at the same time that corporations were given tax handouts. We've got rip-off bills and we've got pollution, we've got sewage in our waters and in our rivers. Why is that? Because we had the great rip-off of privatisation, which stuffs money in the pockets of people in tax havens, and we have to live with the consequences. Pay is down. Pay is basically at the same level it was 2 decades ago. Why? People can't organise in trade unions to improve their pay. Wealth is soaring away. Why is that? Wait, corporate lobbyists write our laws and they get huge, and we've had huge handouts and giveaways from the Bank of England. Did migrants cause any of that? Not one bit of it. Well, the bankers, the bosses and the billionaires and the political and media class that they control, they have caused all of this.
Oh,
the reason, of course...
The media is overwhelmingly left-wing. They all had the same thing on the pages of the front pages the other day. I mean, even the Daily Mail and the Sun are getting in on the act, David.
It was astounding, wasn't it? It was really a setup, and you wonder if it came from the government and that was something that they decided in their Cobra meeting they were going to do. So on Wednesday, they said there's going to be all these far-right riots, 100 of them. There was absolutely nothing happened. I think there was one protest that happened in Farnborough, which was peaceful. And then you have Stand Up to Racism go out and saying, oh, look, we've chased off the far right. Well, it's easy to chase off people who don't exist and didn't appear on the streets, isn't it? But they got the headlines there. And this is exactly what's happening today again. They're putting out another fake story. There's going to be all these far-right riots, Stand Up to Racism, let's go out and beat the far right. And there's nobody there. And they're there. And they've got a lot of money, as you said. They're all professionally organised. And this organisation is intimately linked with the Labour Party. You know, you've got some of the same people there. I mean, as you saw with the councillor who said the dreadful things on Wednesday.
I'm guessing neither of you have ever organised a protest.
Well,
because they really aren't very expensive to organise. You need a level of organisation and you need people that want to turn up for a cause.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, James Schneider, there, former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn and leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. You're with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. After the break, I'll be getting the latest from the world of sport with Aidan McGee. See you then.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Esther, can we talk about Andy Murray? Because Andy Murray has retired, which is great news. And in the papers today, his lovely wife, Kim, said, this is good, I'm glad he's retired, because he can do some childcare now and a bit of housework. But you know all about relationships. Yes. This is going to be an adjustment for them, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, as a father and a husband as well, Mark, that when you are at home, you are actually a big pain in the... Because you are kind of wired and you want to be doing stuff. And Andy Murray's like goal-driven. Can you imagine? He's going to be like, I'm going to make chili con carne. I'm going to make chili like this and this. And, you know, he's going to be like so focused and he's going to have so much energy. I would be terrified to live in the same house as Andy Murray. I know he kind of comes across as quite laid back, you know. He's a bit of a Sean Connery.
But actually, these people are driven, and that's not going to stop just because he's retired, right?
OK, when you've got a driven parent and the parent is at home, they're a nightmare. Yeah. So he needs to be seriously occupied. We've got to think of some hobbies.
Isn't it Kim's turn?
To have her career?
For her to be the most important person in the house.
I think she's quite into her art and painting and things like that.
So isn't it time for him to stay at home, you know, feed the kids and all that, empty the dishwasher, and let her career be the most important?
Although I doubt he'll do that. He'll have so much other stuff to do, punditry. Maybe he'll join his mum. She has a tennis academy.
Actually, I remember there's a documentary about both of them have a hotel in Scotland. Actually, I think they co-run and I think they refurbished it. Yeah. To be fair, you know, Kim, you know, not just the hotel, but I'm sure she'll have other business ventures. You're right. I think it's the right thing to do. Clearly, you know, Andy Murray has had to be out the house. You know, probably she's had to look after the kids. I think anyone that's at the top of their game when they retire, I think the only fair thing to do is to, as you say, maybe take a step back and support your wife.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Hey, you're getting stuck in that inbox. Thank you very much for that. But we're going to get the latest in the world of sport now. Now, the controversial Algerian boxer Emain Khalif won the Olympic gold in a packed Roland Garros. The 25-year-old is one of 2 boxers at the centre of a gender eligibility row. Now, joining me to discuss this is the broadcaster Aidan McGee. Aidan, always a pleasure, my friend. Now,
good to see you, Darren.
The gold medal there, that's kicked off spectacularly. The IOC, the actual committee behind the Olympics, they've stood by that decision, though.
Yeah, they have, and we're not going to get any further on this, Darren, realistically, unless the IBA, who were the original governing body of boxing who imposed the sanctions for the World Championships previously when Khalif was deemed to be ineligible due to gender criteria tests. She was judged to have had an XY chromosome, which increases muscle mass. It also increases durability and makes a punch harder, quite frankly. So we saw in the first fight, or I think it was the second fight actually, against Angela Carina of Italy, that was last week, you know, the fuss that caused and the tears in the middle of the ring. And it was very unedifying for both the IBA and the IOC, because the IBA had, for various reasons, there is a little bit of a fury between the two organisations. So if you think about it, the IBA work within boxing 24/7, same as FIFA with football. Now, FIFA are governing football at the Olympics, but the IBA, which is their boxing equivalent, are not governing boxing at the Olympics. That's been taken off them by the IOC before this. So there is some needle between the two, each trying to discredit the other. But until the IBA reveal how they reached their decision and the IOC also reveal their criteria, we're going to be no closer to knowing who's right and who's wrong. It's possible that Khalif could be a bona fide contender, in which case she's won a gold medal and nobody's liked it. Or it could be the case that she's sailed through these opponents and she shouldn't have been in the first place.
Well,
so until they come clean and show us everything and show full transparency, then we're no further on. And it's not a good look for the Olympic movement as a whole, or for the IOC, or for the IBA, or for any of the boxers involved.
No, I mean, I saw the IOC president actually saying, well, actually, it's not an easy way to determine.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, it's you know, it was a car crash as soon as I heard about it. It wasn't the first round.
No, we all knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
We all knew exactly it would play out.
I mean, there are people saying that Angela Carina sort of faked it a little bit or something. I mean, I just believe that. I believe that's nonsense.
Now,
I mean,
we are doing well overall in the Olympics, all right?
We are indeed. Yeah, we're 5th in the medals table right now. We've had a good spread of medals as well across the board. I mean, lots of different weird and wacky and wonderful events these days. I mean, they were saying that breakdancing hasn't really captured the imagination. But other ones like climbing, yesterday we got a gold yesterday with Toby. Yeah, his father built him a climbing contraption in his back garden during COVID, and he said his earliest memory is climbing out of the cot when he was 3 years old. So he was born to do it, wasn't he? Yeah. But he relied on his Japanese opponent, relied on a little bit of a mishap with like three moves to go. So you do need a little bit of luck in these things, don't you? But look, he took it, and it's fantastic. No. And if you look at the overall medals table, Britain have done really well across lots of different events. And so it's not like we've just done well in the swimming or just done well in the rowing, which is what normally happens. Yeah. They're showing strength across it, and there's still medals to play for. And so who knows? They could even get above 5th.
And then football, we've got the Community Shield, and we've also got a New England manager. Yeah,
I'll start on Lee Carsley quickly. He's quite an unremarkable bloke, but he's done a steady job recently. But he's in an interim role at the moment. People are saying to me, has he got a chance of getting the job? Well, of course he's got a chance of getting the job. Darren, if he keeps winning matches, even if he says he doesn't want the job, he's going to be kind of railroaded into it in some ways. You know, I mean, I knew him when he was at Brentford a few years ago, and he was a temporary manager. He did do well, but it was insistent at the beginning,
I don't want to be a frontline manager. All the aggro that comes with that as well. He was a Republic of Ireland international player, although he's very much from the Midlands, really at heart. He's one of those Ireland players who I think had a Guinness, and so he managed to be eligible for the Republic of Ireland. Just on Manchester United, we've not really discussed domestic football since about the FA Cup final. You've had the Euros, you've had the Olympics, and all the other things going on in between. Erik ten Hag still in situ at Manchester United. They had a football review a couple of months ago, which basically entailed the new owners, Ineos and Sir James Radcliffe, going through a list of candidates that they think might replace ten Hag, and either they weren't available, or basically, the long and the short of it is they couldn't find anyone to replace him.
Aidan, just very, very briefly, how much have you seen people saying if you go on these protests, we'll kick you out of the football club or won't let you into the ground?
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of that.
I have indeed. Yeah, a few clubs have put their oar in when I'm not sure they should.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Just my feeling.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, Aidan. Thank you very much, Aidan McGee there. You're with me, Darren Grimes on GB News. Loads more coming up on the show. We'll see you after this break.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on a chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It was also announced that the Prince of Wales is set to star in a new two-part documentary on ITV covering his mission to try and eradicate homelessness.
Well, let's talk about this and much, much more with Angela Levin, royal biographer, who joins us in the studio. I'm glad to hear that this documentary's been made, Angela, because I worried that he made this big announcement about homelessness, and I thought, goodness me, here is somebody who could maybe do something about this. And then it's all seemed to have gone quiet.
He's been very busy with it, actually. He's gone all over the country to see different areas and how they have been, and to try and change people's attitude to homelessness, that they're people who need help and want to get back into a normal life, and he's there to do it. I mean, we mustn't forget that in, I think it was 2009, he slept out in the street to see for himself what it was like. And he also helps people who are selling the magazine.
Big Issue, no?
Yes, The Big Issue. And he's worked all day long with the same man twice now. So I think he was actually just covering the basic about what it was like for him and how he can now help other people. He and Catherine are putting £3 million straight away into that, and it's going to
Where
be...
does that money come from?
Their own foundation, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not taking it from our tax or anybody else's, you know. And there will be a lot more. And he's been getting the money to do this. And I think he wants to do this so badly because of his mother. You know, she took them to see people who were homeless.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's just there 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 10th of August. This is The Weekend on GB News. King Charles calls for unity and praises the community spirit that countered the riots over the last week. It comes as the policing minister warns there is intelligence more protests could come over this weekend. Across the pond, the race for the White House continues with polls nationally and in battleground states showing Kamala Harris building a lead or catching Donald Trump. We're asking who's going to be the next president.
And Algerian boxer Amin Khalif clinches Olympic gold, hitting back at critics saying, "I am a woman." Should she have been allowed to compete in the first place? I'm Darren Grimes, and this is The Weekend. Now, my friends, this show is absolutely nothing without you and your views. You're going off like you wouldn't believe in this inbox and on gbnews.com/your say. Thank you very much for doing so. We'll get to some of those in a moment and join that conversation. But keeping me company this hour is the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, and the former deputy leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib. But before we get stuck into today's stories, it's the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories. King Charles has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country, speaking out for the first time since the unrest began. He thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace and welcomed how communities have countered the violence. This comes after Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said the police should remain on high alert going into the weekend despite the violence easing. Police forces across the UK are on standby this weekend, with Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds saying the government's in a state of high readiness for the prospect of further disorder. Protesters are out in their hundreds in Manchester already, rallying against racism. No reports of any disorder thus far. Around 741 people have now been arrested over rioting, according to the National Police Chiefs Council, of which over 300 have been charged. Merseyside Police says 2 more people have been charged today following violent disorder in Southport and Liverpool, bringing the total number of people charged there to 24. A Section 60 order is now in place for 12 hours in the Liverpool city centre. The family of 6-year-old Bibi King, who died after being stabbed in Southport, said she was full of joy, light and love. They say she'll remain in our hearts as the sweet, kind and spirited girl we adore. That statement released by Merseyside Police just moments ago, and of course she tragically died alongside 7-year-old Elsie Stankham and Alice de Silva Aguiar, who was 9. A senior police service of Northern Ireland officers says there will be a significant visible policing operation in place ahead of a planned anti-immigration protest and counter-protest in Belfast, where people have begun to gather. Assistant Chief Constable Melanie Jones says the police are expecting a very busy weekend for policing across Northern Ireland, with a risk of spontaneous protest. Around 1,000 people gathered in Belfast for a counter-protest against several hundred anti-immigration demonstrators last night. The funeral for British teenager Jay Slater, who died whilst on holiday in Tenerife, is being held today. Well-wishers who attend the service have been asked to wear something blue in his memory. The post-mortem examination found the 19-year-old died of traumatic head injuries consistent with a fall from height. The Spanish Civil Guard said Mr. Slater could have fallen in the steep and inaccessible area where he was discovered. An investigation has now been launched after a plane crashed in the state of Sao Paulo in Brazil, killing all 61 people on board. The black box was found late last night. There were 57 passengers and 4 crew members on board. And if you're watching us on television, you'll see the dramatic footage of the plane spiralling out of control and crashing through trees, eventually ending in a large plume of smoke. Elsewhere, dozens of people have been killed in a strike that targeted a school turned shelter in Gaza City. That's according to Palestinian health officials. According to Gaza's Civil Defense Agency, more than 100 people have been killed, with dozens more injured. Israel's military said it struck the location yesterday, describing its target as a Hamas command center embedded in the school. Former US President Donald Trump arrived to address the Republican masses at a rally in Montana this morning. The Republican nominee arrived at Bozeman, Montana after his plane was reportedly diverted to a different airport due to a mechanical issue. This comes after Trump yesterday spent nearly an hour at his home in Florida addressing a select group of reporters, claiming that America was in the most dangerous position it's ever been. And he also called Vice President Kamala Harris a radical left person. According to the New York Times today, Kamala is leading in the polls in 3 key states.
Kamala is grossly incompetent and, in my opinion, has a very low IQ. But we'll find out about her IQ during the debate, OK? Let's find out about her IQ.
And in sport, the men's Team GB 400-metre relay team has come away with bronze at the Paris Olympics. The quartet of Great Britain's Zarnell Hughes, Nathaniel Mitchell-Blake, Louis Hinchcliffe and Jeremiah Azu finishing strong in that final. And that is, of course, after the women's team won silver in the same race. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Let's get stuck into today's topics. Now, King Charles has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country, speaking out for the first time since the unrest began. He thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace across the country and welcomed how communities have countered the violence. Now, that comes as Boris Johnson launches a scathing attack against the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, over his handling of these far-right riots and his approach to immigration. Now, joining me to discuss this is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, it was quite the article that Boris Johnson has written, because he basically urges Sir Keir Starmer to start packing right away and get himself abroad and rethink what Boris Johnson perceives as utter, well, madness, frankly, from the Labour Party.
Yeah, it's a very punchy article in the Daily Mail today in classic Boris Johnson style. He starts by criticising Keir Starmer for reversing some Conservative policies, namely building more prisons. In fact, the Labour government has said that it will be closing prisons and will be some of the prisons that are in the worst state for renewing them. And as a result, we'll have to release thousands of prisoners early. Now, Keir Starmer is a bit painted himself into a corner there, because his response to the riot so far has been to get as many people behind bars as possible. Well, that might be very sensible, but as we are living through a prisons overcrowding crisis, it will probably set himself up for problems later down the line. The crux of Boris Johnson's article, though, is criticism of Keir Starmer for not getting to what Boris Johnson sees as the root of the problem of the riots. So, as I say, Starmer's response mainly has been to get the courts working in overtime, get as many people arrested as possible, nearly 500 people arrested already, 150 already charged, all very laudable, but it can't be ignored, as Boris Johnson points out, that 34% of British people, according to one poll, are sympathetic to the rioters' cause, even if they're not sympathetic to the means that the rioters are making. And Boris Johnson makes the point that it can't be true that over a third of British society are sort of racist right-wing thugs. And if that's not the case, well, perhaps those third have a point. And when is Keir Starmer going to talk about the immigration crisis as opposed to just the rioters who are protesting about the immigration crisis?
Well, Olivia, he was asked about it the other day during a press briefing, and he didn't have much to say about it. In fact, I think he would rather talk about anything else but that. But Olivia Utley there, GB News' political correspondent, thank you as ever for your time. Now, folks, a senior police officer in Northern Ireland says there's going to be a significant visible policing operation in place ahead of a planned anti-immigration protest and a counter-protest in Belfast. Let's head up there now and speak to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Oh, Doogie, there are lots of people there now.
Oh, there are. There are hundreds of people, but all mainly from the public sector, and absolutely no police in riot gear whatsoever. No tactical support groups are here. They were here last night for the anti-immigration protesters. In fact, it was shocking how many of them there actually were, with snatched Land Rovers, etc. And they were stopping and searching some of those protesters on the way in to the area. And what we are now seeing is the public sector, many of the trade unions having this protest behind us, and an awful amount of Palestinian flags, gay pride flags. And amazingly, on Friday I seen flags of the NUJ, the National Union of Journalism, where we're meant to be very just straight down the middle on this. So it was quite disturbing to me to see that. But these are people who live in middle class areas and as yet have not seen illegal immigration. And it's very, very important that we stress this, Darren. People in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland are not against immigration. What they are against is undocumented immigrants coming in to Northern Ireland and being put in those working class areas. And they are changing the concept of those working class areas. People there I have spoke to at great lengths who do not want to appear on camera because they would be branded racist. This is where we have got to, that you are branded racist if you turn around and just tell the facts of what is happening. Some of these people can't even get their children into local primary schools because there's so many places set aside for immigrants. Some of them, those very people maybe only have one car. The husband works nights, the wife works days, and they are having to drive their children 3 miles up the road to another school. Then they want to have a family support in the area that they grew up. And they're trying to buy the houses in the family that they grew up, but private landlords have bought those houses up and they give them up over to groups such as Mears that then use those social houses that are in the hands of private landlords, including hotels, give them 5-year contracts in them and move in undocumented immigrants into that area. Now, in the last 2 years, I have been in the Republic of Ireland, which really in terms is so far ahead of Britain, not because of the amount of immigrants they have taken, but because of the amount of immigrants per head of population. We are now seeing even middle class areas kicking back on this and saying no more. We cannot have any more here. We haven't got the facilities or infrastructure to deal with it. One man I spoke to was a butcher on the canal in Dublin, a beautiful tourist place, is now full of tented villages with drugs, paraphernalia, pornography, drink, human excrement. And those shops that are beside those tents are now closing because, well, they can't get women into the shops to buy stuff because of the amount of it here. So these people from the trade unions, and it is the trade unions, I think haven't just got the grips with those areas that are really being affected.
No, right, yeah, middle-class trade unionists, I've no doubt. But Dougie Beattie, thank you very much for joining me as ever and offering your thoughts there. Ben, I have to put to... Oh, I should introduce you first, Ben. I just assume people know who you are. I'm joined now by my panel, the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, and the former deputy leader of the Reform Party, Ben Habib, who I was just about to talk to. Now, Ben, I have to ask you this comment because we saw there the Palestinian flags flown by the trade unionists. You've got the new sort of epilepsy-inducing pride flag that's been waved there.
That's what struck me.
They're saying, one of our viewers, True Brit, says, look, Darren, I'm banging on about this until I'm blue in the face because actually this is all Stonewall's diversity, equity and inclusion, and actually it's that whole agenda that they're putting through universities, hospitals, civil servants, councils. That's the issue here. Do you sort of... Is that the root
I
cause?
completely agree. I completely agree. This isn't about the far right versus sane people who are counter-protesting. The so-called anti-racist marches are actually infused with prejudice as the way that you've just described it. And as you know from past conversations we've had, in my view, diversity, equity and inclusion is an incredibly prejudiced, divisive, government regulatory... expensive, damaging to the economy. But what it does is give protected status to ethnic minorities and affords them the ability to come out and do what they're doing on the streets and have some kind of cloak of protection against the criminal justice system in the way that they behave. And that's why there's also a feeling of two-tier policing, because of this protective cloak that they have. But the one thing I want to draw viewers' attention to in Northern Ireland, it's a most remarkable thing that the anti-immigration protests have managed to do what 40 years of government policy has failed to do, which is bring together people flying Union Jacks and the tricolour of the Republic of Ireland on the same side. They recognise that it is actually an assault on the island of Ireland that's taking place at the moment with mass immigration and illegal migration. I thought Dougie gave a really good exposition of what was going on. I would disagree with Dougie on one thing. This isn't just about illegal migrants. This is about migration, full stop. And the people who joined together to protest are not far right. They are typically the overlooked white working class from deprived areas of Belfast and across the United Kingdom. And they are typically Labour voters. They're not far right.
And on that point, Ben Habib, I've got to bring in Peter Edwards. Now, because one of our viewers, Peter, called Gary, has written in, and Gary says, "Hi, Darren. Please can you try to stop those that are pro-unlimited or pro-mass migration calling people with the opposite view racists and Nazis? It's inaccurate, insulting and insane." That's where we're at with the public discourse at the minute, is it not?
Well, I want to come back. I've heard quite a right-leaning stream of consciousness from Dougie and then views from both of you that I do disagree with quite strongly. I don't understand why Ben takes a view, and Ben and I will disagree on most things, but I don't understand why he takes a view that the Stonewall flag, i.e. in support of gay community or the wider LGBTQ+ community, is, he used the phrase, infused of prejudice. I don't understand that at all. And then coming on to the people who are now in jail...
Can I explain that?
And now coming on to people in jail, to say that they are Labour voters is an absolute nonsense. One can speculate. I think we can all agree they're violent and morons if they're in jail for assaulting mosques or assaulting people. We can agree they're violent.
But do you agree that they're not...
Why are we saying they're Labour voters? There's no evidence of that at all.
But there's more evidence for that, given that they come from deprived working-class areas across the country, than there is to classify them as far-right.
They're at least in Labour constituencies, right? We know that, at least most of them.
Well, so someone who we've said, I'm looking at Times, it could be any newspaper, a guy who's in jail, possibly for assault on police, none of us have met him. We don't know what street he lives on. We don't know how he votes. But Ben's saying with confidence that he's a Labour voter.
No, I didn't say that. No, that's not what I said. What I'm saying is that you're absolutely right that we won't know what their political disposition is. And therefore, we cannot classify them as far right. It is extremely divisive and playing dirty politics by the Prime Minister to categorise all those who have a legitimate protest against immigration as far right. He does it in order to rubbish their position. That's what the Prime Minister is doing. And you're rightly saying, Peter, that we don't know what their political ideology is. But what I'm saying is that I agree with you, but if we were to hazard a guess at what their political leaning is, it's probably Labour, because they come from white, working-class backgrounds across the UK, the deprived areas that have been repeatedly promised that they would be levelled up, and what they've seen is immigrants in masses coming into their communities, being put ahead of them on social housing, education, NHS, getting cash in their pockets. All of this is an offence to the white working class man. And just last point, Labour Party has turned its back on its constituency, which is the working class of this country. The Labour Party is infused with some kind of ideological nonsense that it's inherited from the DEI agenda.
All right.
I think that's a rant, and there's too much for me to respond to there. I don't want to just sit here grumbling. I want to make a meaningful contribution, but Ben didn't offer evidence of what he's saying. We know that in poorer areas, turnout is lower, full stop. So lots of the people Ben believes are left-wing may not vote at all.
I didn't say that. Ben, I didn't say I believe they're left-wing.
Ben, you've had an awful lot of time to rant away.
Yeah, but you miscategorised what I say, Peter.
Tough luck, it's a debate show. So I think we all agree the violence is wrong. I would say, you know, there's lots of individuals in the paper today. If someone's convicted and admitted racially or religiously aggravated harassment, there's no evidence at all to suggest that person from the left. I'd imagine if they behave like that, they're probably not voting at all. And then to come to how the Labour government's doing, you know, Labour, like the last government, will be judged on its record in office, and that'll be on house building, the NHS inflation, all the things that we vote on and care about. But when Labour's been in government for a month, to say, and they've pledged to build more houses, to say immediately that Labour have turned their back on the working class after 5 weeks, I mean, to put it politely, that's a bit daft.
Well, I think it's been going on a lot longer than that, though, Peter, with respect. I think you can go all the way back to Gillian Duffy, you can go all the way back to Tony Blair, and the working class started to move away from the Labour Party. I mean, that's not pure speculation. There is actual evidence.
Well, Labour lost elections, and you need to win working class votes and middle class votes. That's just a fact. But I stress Labour will be judged, and it will be judged harshly on its record over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But to say after 5 weeks, when Labour won and the other parties lost, it's turned back, is just without any evidence at all.
No, it's not without evidence. It's not without evidence. Typical Labour voter. The typical Labour historic ideology
what is a typical
Labour ideology of the past was to promote British workers' rights. OK? You do not promote British workers' rights by embracing mass immigration, the foundations for which were put in place by Tony Blair, as Darren rightly identifies. And you do not hold your hand out in friendship to the white working class in this country by categorising all those who are protesting against immigration as far right. This government has turned its back instantly, within 5 weeks, on the working class in this country.
I think this shows the problem of the debate, because Ben is so angry, and we're all entitled to have different views, but every time I come on the show, Ben gets angry and waves his finger at me. I just want to make one point about Wes Streeting, the new health secretary. He said, in the NHS, you're more likely to meet an immigrant as a nurse or a doctor or a cleaner rather than a patient. I thought that was a very pithy summary. He was trying to get to the heart of it and say, immigrants are not jumping the queue. Immigrants are making a massive contribution to public services and the economy. That is valid, and it's completely different to talking about illegal immigration. I was worried that Dougie in his summary is merging these two things together, because society needs to treat lawful immigrants who come here to make a contribution very distinctly from illegal immigrants.
Well, yes, but there is still a problem with the assimilation of both, right? Assimilation of both legal and illegal.
Well, if you're illegal, let's park that. If you're illegal, you shouldn't be here. So we don't want to assimilate illegal immigrants. If you're a legal immigrant, there's absolutely a pressure on public services, and you're completely right, whether that's school places, house building is obviously a big, very long-standing one. The other one that really comes up is getting to see your GP. And I think, I defend a lot of what the Blair government did, but I think one thing they didn't do enough on was investing in public services infrastructure to ensure that there weren't community tensions and there were enough GP places and so on and so on.
Well, I mean, I saw that Boris Johnson had said that migration was too high, and I just thought, oh, please, Boris.
I know, Boris, come on.
Everyone, you can't say that. Boris Johnson, of course, let it go sky high. Yeah. But anyway, we'll leave that there. We'll come back to you both. Ben Habib there, former Deputy Leader of Reform UK, and Peter Edwards, former editor of Labour List. Now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and more, you can go to the website. We're on gbnews.com. Now, the race for the White House continues, with polls nationally and in battleground states showing Kamala Harris building a lead or catching Donald Trump. More on that after the break.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A lot of people will be saying 22%, inflation's 2%. This is inflation busting. It's a massive pay rise with £2.7 trillion in national debt and rising. This costs £1 billion a year, £5 billion over the term of the Labour government. Why on earth do junior doctors deserve it?
Junior doctors have been overworked and underpaid for many years now. And in the UK, good health in our population is the bedrock for getting the UK economy growing again back to its best. So we need an NHS that's able to deliver elective care for our parents, operations, A&E service when our children need it. And that means we need doctors in our hospitals, paid fairly, motivated to be there, rather than leaving for Australia, which many of my colleagues have been doing throughout the year that I've been working. So I think we need to invest in our health service. This is a crucial first step to do so.
What about the notion that a lot of people are saying, wow, hey presto, as if by magic, this has been resolved 5 minutes into a Labour term. Is there a political element to this? Were the junior doctors and the unions simply unprepared to negotiate with the Conservatives, and as soon as Labour get in, wallop, it's a done deal?
I think there were really genuine frustrations felt by junior doctors over recent years, exhaustion off the back of COVID and previously, but also the sense that pay wasn't keeping up with cost of living. And this is the first pay deal that listens to those concerns seriously, that embeds a pay rise that considers that, but also that talks about other concerns. So rotational training around the country that took where people live out of their control, sending people off to Plymouth with a few weeks' notice. I think that this deal puts staff wellbeing first and therefore puts our patients' wellbeing first as well.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Now, the battle for the White House continues. A short while ago, former President Donald Trump arrived to address the Republican masses at a rally in Montana. The Republican nominee arrived at Bozeman, Montana, after his plane was reportedly diverted to a different airport due to a mechanical issue. Now, despite that delay, Trump still had time to criticise Kamala Harris once again.
Kamala is grossly incompetent and, in my opinion, has a very low IQ. But we'll find out about her IQ during the debate, OK? Let's find out about her IQ.
Well, feisty stuff indeed. I'm sure that'll be a debate well worth watching. Let's see what my panel make of this. Former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, and former deputy leader of the Reform Party, Ben Habib. Peter, I'll start with you. Kamala Harris, to her credit, does seem to have rebound and galvanised the Democratic base.
Yes, I mean, I think we've got to forget everything about the US presidential race up till about 2 or 3 weeks ago, because in effect it restarted, and it reminds me of that adage about you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. I think her first impression has been good so far. I actually think the polls are fairly meaningless at this stage, because whereas Trump's been campaigning for basically 4 years since he lost last time, she's only just got started. To use an American word, she's got a good backstory, worked in McDonald's, I think, to put herself through their equivalent of A-levels or law school, was fairly loyal to Joe Biden, and she's done better than expected so far. We expect Trump will be very personal and mean in the debates, and he was already calling her stupid, but she has had a good start, but don't pay too much attention to the polls, because we're in this kind of...
Is this a honeymoon period?
Yes, I think we're in a rewritten race, and if she's 2 or 3 weeks in to a vote that happens in November, she's 2 or 3 weeks into a sort of a 3.5-month race, so it's relatively early doors.
I mean, Ben, there are a lot of issues, actually. Funnily enough, America has the same issues at our southern border when it comes to illegal migration, for example. There are issues across...
2 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, that's
2 million a year.
Extraordinary, isn't it? And a whole host of other issues in which the Democrats weren't polling too well in. They have rebounded, as I just said with Peter there. So are you expecting... Is this over for Trump now?
No, not at all. Not at all is this over. I mean, I agree that it's very early doors and she's getting a bit of a bounce, partly because money has suddenly flooded into
lots of money.
Lots of money's come in. They weren't backing, understandably, they weren't backing Biden, who was self-evidently senile. And now it was a choice between someone who's senile and who Trump describes as someone who's got a very low IQ. But she can look to what could be unburdened by what has been before. Have you seen that clip? Which I think is interesting. No, I think Trump is going to get ahead of her. She will reveal herself. I do agree with Trump. I don't think she's the brightest, sharpest knife in the box or brightest button in the jar or whatever the expression is. And
is there a worry, though, that he, as Peter said, that he will go on the personal and that will put people off?
She's gone for the personal for him. She's already said he's a bit weird.
Right.
The presidential races are very ad hominem. They go for each other's jugular. It's not like the refined British political scene where Peter and I can have a civilised debate on GB News. They go for each other.
Yeah. I mean, Peter, what I would say, though, is that I remember when, was it a CNN poll? I forget, but they said Hillary Clinton had a 99% chance of winning the 2016 presidential.
Well, just forget it. I mean, just forget the polls, because even in the kind of last hour of the race, they can be wrong. But we're in the first few weeks of the race, so just forget the polls. I know we need to talk about something, but I think I'm quite interested in the economy, because I think I'd imagine for the next week or two, whenever the debates are, Kamala Harris will continue to be ahead in general in national polls, possibly in a few swing states as well, which is where the change has happened, which is why we're talking about it. But Trump is still ahead on the economy, which is fascinating. I'm obviously very anti-Trump, but Trump ran a business, and he was accused over a long period of inflating the worth of his assets and inflating the worth of his business, which he denied vigorously. But he's been a CEO. Some would say he was hopeless or exaggerated it, but he's run a business and he's ahead on the economy, and we know Americans, like most countries, like here, vote on the economy.
He was very good for the American economy last time as president. He cut corporation tax in the teeth of massive criticism. People said, don't do it. It won't boost the economy. All you're going to do is damage the fiscal position of the US, which is already poor. And actually it boosted the US. He handed over a very healthy economy to Biden.
But then J.D. Vance, who is President Trump's nominee for vice president, he has, I think, Ben Habib, and I don't wish to make assertions here, but I actually think he has different views on the economy than perhaps you would, to be honest. He's very protectionist, would you say?
Yeah, I'm not wholly against protection.
OK.
I think unfettered free trade is not necessarily a good thing. Look at the way we've created a dependence on China, an inability to produce steel domestically, an inability, therefore, to be sure that the UK can defend itself. Unfettered free trade needs to be measured, and I disagree with so-called, conservative ideology when it goes to, just get to the lowest possible cost of production. I think you need to look at what national interest at the same time.
That's what they're talking about. But Peter, thank you very much. That's Peter Edwards there, and Ben Habib, thank you very much too. We'll come back to that panel after the break. Now, we're outside coming up the Home Office as protesters rally at the Stop the Far Right and Stand Up to Racism demonstrations across the country. We're live with our national reporter after your headlines with Tatiana.
Darren, thank you. The top stories. His Majesty the King has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country. He thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace and welcomed how communities have countered the violence. This comes after Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said the police should remain on high alert this weekend despite the violence easing. Around 15,000 people are taking part in an anti-racism rally in Belfast following a week of unrest and disorder in the city. The demonstration began at Writers Square and made its way to City Hall, where speeches are also taking place. A senior Police Service of Northern Ireland officer earlier promised a significant visible policing operation. Around 1,000 people gathered in Belfast for a counter-protest against several hundred anti-immigration demonstrators last night. Police forces across the UK are on standby this weekend, with a Cabinet Office minister saying the government's in a state of high readiness for the prospect of further disorder. Protesters are out in their hundreds in Manchester, rallying against racism. No reports of any disorder thus far. And around 741 people have now been arrested over rioting, according to the National Police Chiefs Council, of which 302 have been charged. Merseyside Police says 2 more people have been charged there today following violent disorder in Southport and Liverpool, bringing the total number of people charged there to 24. A Section 60 order is now in place for 12 hours in Liverpool city centre. Meanwhile, the family of 6-year-old BB King, who died after being stabbed in Southport, said she was full of joy, light and love, and she'll remain in our hearts as the sweet, kind and spirited girl that we adore. That statement released by Merseyside Police. And of course, she tragically died along with 7-year-old Elsie Stankham and Alistair Silva Aguiar, who was 9. Up to 500 mourners have attended the funeral service of teenager Jay Slater, who, quotes, touched the lives of so many people. The British teenager died whilst on holiday in Tenerife. Those who attended the service wore blue in his memory. A post-mortem examination found the 19-year-old died of traumatic head injuries consistent with a fall from height. The Spanish Civil Guard said Mr. Slater could have fallen in the steep and inaccessible area where he was discovered. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Cloudy for some in the south, but brighter in the north before turning hot and humid Sunday and into Monday. But having a look at the bigger picture, we've got this waving feature, and that's responsible for the cloud and outbreaks of rain that we'll see in the south today. A bit of a squeeze in the isobars further towards the north. So a lot of cloud compared to yesterday, especially across parts of Wales, the Midlands and down towards the south. Perhaps thick enough for some spots of rain and drizzle. But in the north, best of the sunshine here with sunny spells. Still a few showers coming into Scotland, but these moving through quite quickly in a brisk wind. Highs here of 20 degrees, but further south 24 to 25. Now, as we go into the latter half of the day, clouds should melt away, so we'll start seeing some late evening sunshine across parts of Wales and the Midlands, but holding on to a lot of cloud further towards the south. Still sunny spells into the evening across Northern Ireland, Northern England, and holding on to a few showers across parts of Scotland still, but like I said, they're moving through quite quickly. So through Saturday evening and into the night, that cloud still persisting across the southern parts of England, so a murky night here and also quite humid and muggy as well. Elsewhere, clearer skies developing widely, showers generally fading across much of Scotland and actually feeling quite fresh underneath the clear skies, especially in the rural spots further towards the north. But underneath this cloud and murky conditions, a humid feel, temperatures 16 or 17 degrees. So as we start Sunday morning then, a lot of clouds still persisting across the south, but as we go into the afternoon, that should start breaking up to reveal sunny spells, and for the majority of the UK, plenty of warm and hot sunshine on offer, with temperatures climbing up to 29 degrees. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon, Britain. Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained. I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Now, dozens of protests are taking place up and down the country today for the Stop the Far Right and Stand Up to Racism. We're going to one such protest up in Manchester. Now, as you can see, it's getting pretty lively there. What's that? An anti-Israel slogan there. Lots of Palestinian flags, lots of chants and everything else going on there. I mean, I don't know what this obsession is with these protests that are supposed to be combating what's going on in our country, actually turns into a proxy for Palestine and basically bashing Israel at every given opportunity. And I heard earlier there was chants from the river to the sea, which in my opinion is calling for the genocide of the Jews. But, you know, I don't know how that's an anti-racism chant. I really, really don't. But, you know, there they are. The demo is kicking off. And, well, there are several of these going on up and down the country right now as we speak. I can't see any counter-protests, you know, the ever prolific in the media sense, far right doesn't appear to have emerged, but we'll bring you more of those pictures as and when we get them. Right, folks, we're joined now by national reporter Charlie Peters to give us the latest, which is outside of the Home Office. Charlie, we've been seeing the pictures there up in Manchester. It appears to me to have turned into another one of what Suella Braverman deemed to be hate marches.
Well, Darren, I'm not seeing those pictures, but there are significant stand-up to racism protests taking place across the country today. The police are on high alert and 6,000 specialist riot police remain on standby to be mobilised across the nation if necessary. For the last fortnight, with these protests, counter-protests and significant disorder associated with them, the police have relied a lot on mutual aid, where other officers from different forces come to support local teams when they have to face down rioters or violent disorder. So that's the message that the National Police Chiefs Council are putting out today. They also said last night, their chair, that the tide had turned, they believed, after the last significant piece of disorder taking place on Tuesday evening in Plymouth, but they remained on high alert and were not going to be complacent. And that's just one side of the criminal justice proceedings going on, because, of course, we've got to deal with the legal aspects, the courts. Now, the Crown Prosecution Service say they have an additional 100 prosecutors, many of them working round the clock, to deal with all the additional pressures that this disorder and various sets of protests have put onto the system. Many courts sitting today. Some highlights from the magistrates in the last hour. Laura Connolly, a wife of a Tory councillor, arrived at the Nottingham magistrates earlier today. She's been remanded in custody on charges of racial hatred. She was alleged to have shared a post about burning down asylum hotels, and she'll appear at a Crown Court on Monday. Another person appearing in the magistrates today, a scaffolder who is alleged to have had a knuckle duster at a protest in Southampton earlier this week. And just to bring you a line from the defending barrister in court, said he put it on his fingers and he couldn't get it off. She then argued that he has quite thick knuckles. Well, the judge hearing the argument decided to also remand Lee James, 42, into custody. He'll appear at a Crown Court on Monday as well. So the police remain on high alert with all of these demonstrations after the last significant round of so-called anti-fascist demonstrations taking place on Wednesday evening. The police standing by to monitor those protests. We've had 2 reports of arrests in Newcastle, but no further around the country.
All right, Charlie Peters there. Thank you very much for that update as ever. Right, we'll see what my panel makes of this now. Former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, and former deputy leader of the Reform Party, Ben Habib. One of our comments, Ben, says, you might as well rename this... This is from John, who is a member. Thank you very much for being a member, John. He says, you might as well rename this country Palestine, because that's all I ever see. Palestine, Palestine, Palestine. These flags everywhere. How about we put Union Jacks on all the lampposts around the country?
Well, I wish we were prouder of our country and our flag and our history and our identity and our culture. I wish we were prouder. I wish we had positive government initiatives to promote the United Kingdom to the people of the United Kingdom. And I wish we didn't practice DEI. In the earlier segment, Peter challenged me on how DEI might be divisive. Well, I'll tell you how it's divisive. It literally puts a protected status around minority ethnic ethnicities, around people who have minority religious beliefs, sexual preferences, including the transgender ideology lot. And when you create a protected status around people and you're promoting them, and businesses are required to employ them ahead of white people, to report on how many ethnicities and how... I run a business, a public company, Peter, you can shake your head. I have to report...
I've run a company as well.
I have to report on the number of people from different backgrounds that I employ. And this progressive discrimination is nothing more than discrimination against the majority of the people in this country. DEI is divisive, and it's damaging to the cultural, social fabric of this country, and it's deeply damaging to our economy and our defences. Even the RAF was looking to hire people from diverse backgrounds to fly jets as opposed to white people. They didn't want white jet fighter pilots. I don't care about the colour of people's skin. I want them to do the job that they're best suited to do.
All right, thank you very much for that, Ben Habib. One of our comments says that actually this DEI has permeated every institution and torn the soul out of the country. I mean, what I saw this week, Peter, was the fact that Robert Peston, who of course has ITV's flagship politics show, was advertising for a job in media, and you could only apply if you met this diversity, equity and inclusion target. And can you understand the frustration by people saying, actually, I look at the stats and I see that it's the white working class who are doing less well than other groups?
OK, let's try and disaggregate facts and opinions. So I've been an employer as well in the public and in the private sector.
Well, that is a fact about the white working class in schools.
Hold on, but I've never seen anything in years of being an employer and a chief executive of community organisations where employers are forced to hire someone.
Not forced. You know nothing, Peter.
Ben, let me speak.
You actually don't know.
Please stop talking.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Please stop talking.
Yeah, make the point.
Yeah, so I've been chief executive in a political organisation for 6-7 years. The law does not force companies or charities or third sector organisations to employ someone of a particular race. Companies and so on can choose to do that, and obviously we've seen it in many walks of life. I've not seen the Robert Peston advert. What we often see on job adverts is not a legal requirement, but we've often seen a form of words that says applications from underrepresented groups are encouraged. So it's offering support, but it's not saying we will hire a gay person exclusively or this is only a job for people of colour. It's encouraging it.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit worried that we're kind of creating myths.
No, Peter hasn't got a clue. There is a positive obligation on companies under Section 172 of the Companies Act to promote social justice. That has been instituted through regulation across the United Kingdom through ESG, environmental, social and governance. The social element of ESG is diversity, equity and inclusion. Many regulatory bodies, including the FCA, the Financial Reporting Council and others, require the businesses that they regulate to use DEI as a fundamental basis for delivery of social justice in their communities.
And Peter, I have to read out, because this is from Robert Peston, and the job application says, this opportunity is only open to individuals from a group that is underrepresented in the creative industries. Again, that anger and resentment towards all of this, do you not think that all of these initiatives, they may well be laudable or whatever else, but they're actually making things worse, the divisiveness in the country?
I don't think they're making things worse. I mean, the organisation I ran before my current job was in East London, and it had a majority Muslim workforce. So we spent a lot of time thinking about these issues, and the approach to it was generally when you shortlist someone for a job, you want the best people, and it kind of helps, certainly in a community organisation, to have a shortlist that represents a community. So living in East London, if you had a shortlist of 5 or 6 white middle-aged men, and I'm obviously a white middle-aged man, that'd be really odd. But actually, living in East London also found that was quite easy to do. There was no requirement for positive discrimination. If you shortlisted the best people, you tended to get women and people of colour and a few white British men and possibly gay people, and you did get a cross-section of society.
We'll leave that particular discussion there. A huge thank you to the panel. Peter Edwards, former editor of Labourist and former deputy leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib. Lots to talk about. Coming up, I'm getting to your views. I promise I am. We've got lots more to discuss. That's after this short break.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, to enrich us on the best cheeses and wine to buy, I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of Inflorescence, Jacinta Madison Wilson. Jacinta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also, thank you so much for bringing what is
what a Sunday you're having.
of wonderful... What do we have before us?
So, we've got 3 gorgeous wines to try today. We've got an English sparkling, we've got a beautiful rosé and a dessert wine, and, of course, cheese.
Wonderful.
And paired them all beautifully.
Now, English sparkling wine has had a bit of a renaissance.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
To use a French word to describe English sparkling wine. It's having a bit of a moment in the sun.
Absolutely. I just think it's so exciting that this is right on our doorstep, essentially, an hour out of London, and we're around beautiful vineyards.
The chalk sort of sediment is exactly the same as the Champagne region of France.
Yeah, our soils are really similar. We use the same grape varieties a lot of the time. We make it in exactly the same way as Champagne. Our climate is like Champagne was 40 to 50 years ago. So we're really kind of drinking it blind. You almost wouldn't know that you're not drinking champagne. But it's right here on our doorstep. We can stay local now.
Absolutely marvellous. Well, we've got... what is the best order to start?
OK, well, we're going to start with sparkling, because all things in life should start with sparkling. I got married a month ago, and this was actually the... Thank you so much. This was the wine I chose to have as our first wine that we served the guests. This is from a winery called Bluebell, which is in Sussex, and I've chosen to pair this with a lovely... kind of the English version of Camembert, which is called Tunworth. It's a very classic pairing of Champagne and Brie. So we're kind of going to do the English version of that now.
Classic.
Absolutely. Are you ready to get stuck in?
I am so...
OK.
Hang on. Is it cheese first or wine first?
I'd have a little sip of the wine first.
Sip of the wine, bite
have a little bite of the cheese and then some more wine. Get it all mixed up in there.
It's like a cheese sandwich.
Exactly. Yes.
OK, here
Cheers.
we go. Cheers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Lots of you have been sending in your thoughts. Jeffrey Dobson on that diversity, equity and inclusion point, he says, Darren, Robert Peston's job advert, I can't believe that ethnic minorities or LGBTQ+ are underrepresented in the media industry. Surely it means the role is only open to the straight white working class. Well, that would be a turn up for the books, Jeffrey, wouldn't it? I don't think ITV would like that one all too much. John says Donald Trump is going to help Nigel Farage save the West. Well, I mean, you know, what we've seen recently has filled me with dread, and many of you as well. In this inbox, all of you are feeling really, really quite nervous about what's going on in our country. And speaking of what's going on in our country, on the UK protests, Siobhan says, I'm against immigration, but I'm not far right or racist. It's heartbreaking to be branded as one. And Siobhan, you absolutely should not feel like that. You shouldn't be made to feel like that. You are not, right? I know that in my heart of hearts. I don't even know you, Siobhan, but I feel sorry and deeply, deeply, I find it an egregious slander by the political and media class to actually smear everybody with concerns as far right. There are millions of us, let's not forget that. Now continue to let me know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. Join the conversation there. You're with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. See you after the break.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Some late evening sunny spells in the north, cloudier in the south before turning hot and humid Sunday and more so into Monday. So looking at the bigger picture then, we've got this waving feature and this is responsible for the areas of cloud today, but higher pressure situated towards the south. So through the rest of today then, that cloud should generally melt away, generally just staying along the southern coasts of England, so murky here. Elsewhere, clearer skies are developing, any showers across Scotland generally fading as we go through the night. So underneath the clear skies could turn quite chilly for some of us in rural spots, but underneath this cloud, a humid, uncomfortable night with some muggy conditions here. So to start Monday morning then, like I said, a lot of cloud around, especially across parts of Devon and Cornwall and along English coast, some low cloud here. Elsewhere, some sunny spells, perhaps turning a bit hazy with the sunshine across Northern Ireland and parts of Northern England as well. And across Scotland, sunny spells mixed with just a few showers still coming in from the west. So through the rest of Sunday, hopefully most of this cloud should start lifting and breaking and that low cloud retreating back towards coastal areas. Elsewhere, many places seeing plenty of sunshine, showers fading across parts of Scotland as well. And for many of us, it is going to be a warm, if not very warm and humid day. Highs in the southeast up to 27, possibly even 29 degrees. So then as we go into Sunday afternoon and evening time, that cloud generally melting away, plenty of clear skies on offer, but notice low pressure out towards the west, and that could bring in a focus for some quite heavy thundery showers on Monday. Going to be feeling very hot as well, highs of up to 32 on Monday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could become the next giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt just a lot nicer. We went out for dinner, just enter. And you never expect to win, but I did.
Get your entry in now. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 2 o'clock on Saturday the 10th of August. This is The Weekend on GB News. King Charles has called for unity and praised the community spirit that countered the riots over the last week. It comes as the policing minister warns there is intelligence more protests could happen over the weekend. Across the pond, the race for the White House continues, with polls nationally and in battleground states showing Kamala Harris building a lead or catching Donald Trump. We're asking who will be the next president. And the Algerian boxer Amin Khalif clinches Olympic gold. She hit back at critics saying, "I am a woman." Should she have been allowed to compete in the first place? And folks, I want to give a quick shout out to Wendy D, who says, "I'm a happy member of GB News, but never by my name do I ever see the long forward member of GB News." Wendy, thank you very much for being a member of GB News. We love you all. I'm Darren Grimes, and this is The Weekend. Now, folks, like Wendy, you can get in touch by visiting gbnews.com/yoursay and join the conversation with me there. Now, keeping me company this hour is the author and journalist Nikki Hodgson and the broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon. Now, before we get stuck into today's stories, we're going to go to the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. His Majesty the King has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country, speaking out for the first time since the unrest began. King Charles thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace and welcomed how communities have countered the violence. This comes after Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said the police should remain on high alert going into this weekend, despite the violence easing. Around 15,000 people are taking part in an anti-racism rally in Belfast following a week of unrest and disorder in the city. The demonstration began at Writers' Square and made its way to City Hall, where speeches are also taking place. GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie has more.
For the second week in a row, Belfast city centre is now closed down because of protests. This one, though, is pro-immigration, fronted up by the trade unions of Northern Ireland, Gay Pride and Amnesty International. But more importantly, the political classes have joined in, and many in those working class areas that are facing the majority, the biggest amount of undocumented immigration, now feel that their political voice has gone. This parade will due to end in the next hour, but it remains to be seen what will happen in the coming days.
Police forces across the UK are on standby this weekend, with a Cabinet Office minister saying the government's in a state of high readiness for the prospect of further disorder. Protesters are out in their hundreds in Manchester, rallying against racism. No reports of any disorder thus far. Around 741 people have now been arrested over rioting, according to the National Police Chiefs Council, of which over 300 have been charged. Merseyside Police says 2 more people have been charged following violent disorder in Southport and Liverpool, bringing the total number of people charged there to 24. A Section 60 order is now in place for 12 hours in Liverpool city centre. Meanwhile, the family of 6-year-old BB King, who died after being stabbed in Southport, said she was full of joy, light and love, and she'll always remain in our hearts as the sweet, kind and spirited girl that we adore. That statement released by Merseyside Police today. Of course, she tragically died, along with 7-year-old Elsie Stankham and Alistair Silva Aguirre, who was 9. Up to 500 mourners have attended the funeral service of teenager Jay Slater, who, quote, touched the lives of so many people. The British teenager died whilst on holiday in Tenerife. Those who attended the service wore blue in his memory. A post-mortem examination found the 19-year-old died of traumatic head injuries consistent with a fall from height. The Spanish Civil Guard said Mr. Slater could have fallen in the steep and inaccessible area where he was discovered. In other news, an investigation has now been launched after a plane crashed in the state of Sao Paulo, killing all 61 people on board. The black box was found late last night. There were 57 passengers and 4 crew members on board. And if you're watching us on television now, you'll see the dramatic footage of the plane spiralling out of control and crashing through trees, eventually ending in a large plume of smoke. Dozens of people have been killed in a strike that targeted a school turned shelter in Gaza City. That is according to Palestinian health officials. According to Gaza's Civil Defense Agency, more than 100 people have been killed, with dozens more injured. Israel's military said it struck the location yesterday, describing its target as a Hamas command centre embedded in the school. And in sport, the men's team GB 400-metre relay team has come away with bronze at the Paris Olympics. The quartet of Great Britain's Zarnell Hughes, Nathaniel Mitchell-Blake, Louis Hinchcliffe and Jeremiah Azu finishing strong in that final in the 4x100. And that is, of course, after the women's team won silver in the 4x100 relay. Team GB's Nathaniel Mitchell-Blake spoke to reporters after the victory and praised his teammate Zarnell.
It's been an enjoyable experience to kind of just learn from each other and go through this process together. So I think that makes it even more special. He's the fastest man in British history. So having him as a part of our quartet will always bode well with us and always give us an opportunity to elevate the possibility of success. And for him to put his health literally on the line for all of us to achieve a medal, we're very grateful for that.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks ever so, Tatiana. Right, let's get stuck into some more topics, shall we? King Charles has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country, speaking out for the first time since the unrest began. He thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace across the country and welcomed how communities have countered the violence. But the big question is, was he right to do so? Or should the monarch not be getting overly involved in these really quite fractious political issues? Well, I'm going to pose that question to the royal historian and broadcaster, Rafe Hadel-Mancoux. Rafe, thank you very much for your time. Rafe, I just want to very briefly read out a question from a viewer who says, he's called Jonathan, and Jonathan says, there's a massive disconnect between, on the one side, the government, the unions, the woke middle classes, the king, and the hard left, and on the other side, the working class normal British person. Jonathan thinks that His Majesty the King has allied himself like this. Do you?
Yeah, I can understand that question. And I should say, you know, I'm, aside from being a royal historian, I'm also a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, and I specialise in the problems of mass immigration, the problems of lack of integration, particularly within Britain's Islamic communities. And I've given many speeches showing that the super diversity we now have in Britain is a weakness, not a strength, especially in our neglected towns and cities where, quite rightly, you know, people are living every day with the terrible consequences of mass immigration, and they've seen their towns and cities change beyond all recognition in the space of 2 decades. So I absolutely understand that, and I have a lot of sympathy with all of this. Look, the cardinal rule of monarchy is that the king must never involve himself in politics. So we have to ask, does this statement actually involve His Majesty in politics? Especially because in 2011, the last time we saw rioting on this scale, Her late Majesty the Queen did not issue a statement, even though 5 people died during those days of violence. Now, we don't know whether the statement was made at the initiative of the palace or whether the Prime Minister formally advised the King to say this. We'll never know whether that was true or not. But it's also the case that our monarch is very different to his predecessor, to his mother. You know, as Prince of Wales, he spent much of his life devoted to interfaith dialogue, to trying to build bridges between ethnic communities. So in that context, I think this statement can be understood. And what we have to realise, if we look at the statement, you know, the criminality and violence and mayhem that we've seen on our streets from both sides, importantly, and the terror instilled in people living innocently in their communities can never be condemned and can never be justified. So it's not political for the King to call for unity, for the King to try to ease tensions, and for the King to praise the police for restoring peace to our streets. That's entirely in keeping with the King's role. And crucially, he doesn't name the far right. He doesn't name Islamic extremists. He just addresses criminality and violence from the few. So that's not politically unneutral. What I would say, however, is that the King, by issuing this statement, has now set a precedent which must be followed for consistency. So in the years ahead, if the black or Asian community have rioting, if BLM and Antifa or, you know, Islamic extremists or environmentalist extremists start rioting in the streets, the King must issue a similar statement, because there is so much distrust now in this country about our institutions, justifiably, because of the appearance of two-tier policing, the appearance of two-tier reporting from our legacy media, and two-tier government in the way that they speak about the protesters versus the counter-protests. The monarchy must rise above that to avoid accusations of double standards.
I mean, Rafe, in your heart of hearts then, because Sharon's written in, and Sharon's a member of GB News. Thank you very much, Sharon. She says the King should keep quiet. The Queen never got involved, which, of course, you've just mentioned. Now, Rafe, my concern with His Majesty the King, and I am by no means a Republican, has always been around the King getting involved in politics around environmental issues that you've just mentioned, highly contentious, I think of real detriment to the working class. And these issues, once you start making statements, no matter how sort of bland or beige you try to make them, there will always be people that interpret them in different ways. So surely it just is, on these really contentious issues, better to just say nada.
And there's, you know, there's a lot of reason for saying that, and that indeed was the policy of the late Queen. Our King is a very different type of monarch, and each monarch approaches their role differently. The King is far less involved in these matters than he was as Prince of Wales. He understands the importance of neutrality, but you're quite correct. There are valid arguments to be had here. Look, King George V was at one extreme. King George V was very involved in government. Queen Elizabeth II was almost completely uninvolved in government. Our current king is somewhere between the two, but he's far closer to his late mother than to his great-grandfather. But on this statement, actually, we know that this statement, importantly, came out after the YouGov polling. And the YouGov polling shows that the vast majority of the British public do not approve of the unrest of recent days, well over 80%, versus only 7% who actually support the unrest. So the British public is actually on the King's side in this. So I think it was quite a safe decision for him to make. I think he has remained within those bounds of neutrality, but clearly, you know, veering quite close to the edge, one could say, in terms of the way that the communities were mentioned. But I think he understands his role. I think the palace is fully aware of the importance of this. As I say, the test is now going forward. Will similar statements be issued when there are rioting from different parts of the British population?
Well, we shall see, Rafe, and no doubt we'll have you to be able to react to it if and when it happens. But one of our viewers says, Rafe is a legend. He frequently destroys misinformed idiots on television. There we are. No, high praise indeed, Rafe. High praise indeed. Rafe Heidel-Mancu, thank you very much for your time there. Let's see what my panel make of this. We've got the author and commentator, Nikki Hodgson, and the broadcaster and journalist, Claire Muldoon. Nikki, I'll start with you. The sort of dalliance into politics, it's not really because of the fact that the statement didn't go into criticising people for any particular political bent or anything like that.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people who are saying, I knew this would happen. I knew Charles would be like that.
But I don't think he's got a choice at this stage. Considering how people now feel about the monarchy and, you know, the fact that there is an increasing movement for a republic, not saying anything is no longer an option. He has to be seen to be adding value somehow to society. And that means he can't ignore these kinds of events. I mean, he did wait till Friday to have the phone call. That's literally last night, when basically it was all over. And it's important to say that he's not having his weekly audience with the Prime Minister at the moment, because they don't over the summer. I didn't know that, actually. They get the summer off. Who knew? Still things that happen that need to be talked about, obviously. But, I mean, I just think it's interesting because an American friend asked me, where's the king?
Right, yeah.
And I had to try and explain why you wouldn't be getting a statement from the monarch anytime soon. I'm slightly encouraged, but it's very bland. There's kind of nothing in it. And if they go and visit communities and do some community work after, fine, that's great. That's what the royals should be doing.
Would you have liked him to have been more robust then?
Yeah, I think so.
And say what sort of thing would you have liked to?
Well, I just think he should have been quicker. I think on Wednesday would have been better timing, personally.
Do you agree with that, Claire?
No, I don't. I really don't think he should have taken a view at all, and I don't think he should have published anything. And because I don't think the public actually look to the sovereign or the monarchy as it is for guidance any more than they used to, because we have got 24 hours rolling media coverage, news channels. People get their news from TikTok, for heaven's sake, more than the gracious statements from an ailing king who is king of the country. I think that optic now is completely and utterly lost. There still will be, and especially GB News viewers, a lot of monarchists, which is great. But I think the whole model of the royal family has to change. I think King Charles himself realises that with a slimmed-down version of the monarchy that's actually given him problems.
Well, Claire, the grumpy grandad in our GB News Your Say inbox says this is exactly why the old Queen never got involved.
Yeah.
Because whatever they say could be seen as taking sides, even if it wasn't intended. And King Charles should have taken his mother's lead on this. But we have to remember that His Majesty is also advised by the Prime Minister. How much do you think that... I'm not asking you to be Mystic Meg, because, of course, we're not privy to those conversations. But how much do you
Darren,
think
if I were Mystic Meg, I wouldn't be sitting here right now, because I'll have won the lottery. I'd have won the lottery. Before he was the King of Britain, Prince Charles, as Prince of Wales, was quite political. He did dalliance at times with politics and with his statements that he released, especially, moreover, on environmental issues. That we all remember him talking to his plants at Highgrove. And he's very much part of, he's very interested in the whole net zero thing and getting the country more economic in terms of renewables, etc. We know that. We know he's a very green king. I would actually question whether or not, as a country, we actually look to the monarch for comfort, for guidance, for legislation, for anything other than pomp and ceremony. And I think you made a good point, Nikki. I would like to see them out, once they've come back from Birkhall in Scotland, to actually visit the families of those tragically slain girls in Southport. And I think if they can do any good with their material wealth, if they can do anything good with their publicity, then that's where I would far rather it be posted.
Said the girls had died. These girls didn't die.
No.
You know, they were murdered.
They were murdered.
Yeah.
They were murdered. They were slaughtered.
And so then that sort of fits into my point, though, Nikki, which is that the king, the monarch, the crown, if you like, beyond Charles, is the unifier, right?
Sure.
To unify the whole country. The country right now is hurting, right? I think the country is feeling a deep sense. One of our viewers, 75-year-old grandmother, wrote in and she said that she doesn't recognise her own country. How can the king possibly seek to ever get involved in a discussion where we're seeing people saying Sir Keir Starmer, as Prime Minister, has actually fanned the flames of what's going on in the country right now?
Well, with this kind of modified language, you know, without pinning anything to the mast. I mean, we have to remember as well that King Charles always wanted to be seen as defender of the faiths. Do you remember that was the thing that was said before he was ever king? And so it is going to be very important to him to not put the blame on any kind of, you know, religious or racial element. He's never going to do that. But, you know, I still think that I still think it's appropriate. I still think it's appropriate because I feel that the public want more for their money out of monarchy now.
Right. So in the world of 24/7, the sort of Kim Kardashian reality telly, dare I say Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, is that true?
No,
I think it cheapens the monarchy.
Yeah, and I think it brings them down to this instant gratification. And I think it is. I don't think the monarchy should be there to be approachable because they're not. Who on earth can actually identify with the monarchy at all on any level?
Mary says he knows nothing about British people's lives. That's the rhetoric that he's hearing.
One of your viewers, the 75-year-old grandmother. Sorry, I forgot what your name was.
But I have two, actually, Claire.
But my kids are actually, my youngest is 20. They don't recognise the Britain that they were brought up in West London.
Yeah.
They're all, I mean, they're scattered all over Leeds, Newcastle, Belfast. I've got one in Belfast and one in Australia. And they're just like, Mum, we just don't recognise Britain anymore.
I mean, Nikki, on that point,
That's
do you
sad.
have sympathy for people that say that?
Yes,
or not?
definitely. I mean, my family emigrated to Australia 20 years ago. So my brother actually works in politics in Australia, so he keeps abreast of UK news. But he is constantly asking me questions about why has this happened? What's this about? Trying to understand. You know, he studied politics and international relations, so he's got all the background to understand where this has come from. But even he is, you know, boggled by some of it. And I think, and it's important for people to say if they don't understand. That isn't criticising any particular group for saying that. No. It's just saying what has happened so rapidly in this country. I think that's completely fair enough.
Yeah, all right. I wasn't expecting you to say that, actually. You're a sort of... you can't pin Nicky Hodgson down.
I'm contrarian, I'm afraid.
Well, True Brit says, they're coming back to you, though, Nicky, he's not a defender of the faith, which was the Church of England. He is now defender of faith. Outright, all faith.
Yeah, but I meant plural, exactly.
I know,
yeah, but I understand.
But I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not sure the head of the established church should be saying that, to be honest, like, not to diminish anyone else.
Well, not when he was anointed king, you know. You've got to remember that the coronation was a religious ceremony.
Yes.
You know, there isn't... we don't know what happens behind the element that we don't get to see, but... You know, that has a divine aspect to it still.
Well, the inbox is going crazy, let me tell you that, and a lot of people are not very happy at all. His political mess says, what about defending our culture, Your Majesty? Well, we'll see about that one. Thank you very much there, Nicky Hodgson and Claire Muldoon. We'll be getting more from them. For all the best analysis, folks, and opinion on that story and more, you can go to our website, gbnews.com. Now, coming up, the Algerian boxer Amin Khalif clinches the Olympic gold, heading back at critics saying, I'm a woman. Should she have been allowed to compete in the first place, though? We're discussing that after this short boxing match, also known as The Break.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Alex, can you tell us about Tom Cruise's diet?
Tom
Tom Cruise's diet, I mean, so there was the story today in the Daily Mail talking about the fact that obviously, you know, the guy has a very, very strict diet. He pretty much has no alcohol in his diet, has very strict times he eats. He only eats meat and fish.
Happy.
And actually, can I just say, I think this is very depressing. You know, life is short. I don't know why people have... And lots of my friends who go to the gym, they're absolutely obsessed with only having chicken and rice and barely any sauce on it. It's just, what's the point, you know?
You make a good point. Life is short. What do they...
And so is Tom Cruise.
YOLO. You only live once.
Yeah, YOLO.
But then you can live your life as you want to live it. So if you want to live it the healthiest person ever in the whole world, then, you know, that's your one life.
But you raised a great point in the meeting today, which is 64 old anymore? It's not, sort of 62. It's not old, is it?
No.
62 is the new 40.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, if you don't... Tom Cruise is a multi-millionaire. Doesn't he want to just, like, relax and enjoy his life now? Why is he still getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym and eating chicken breasts with no sauce on it?
OK, Tom Cruise is another one of these driven people. Tom Cruise is absolutely 100% driven to drive a fighter pilot aeroplane. I mean, how could you actually learn to drive a plane? He is so driven, he is so disciplined, and when you're that disciplined, you know about blood, alcohol, you know, sugar spikes. I bet you he drinks vinegar. Bet you any money he's into gut health. I'm telling you, gut health is in. Everyone's talking about gut health.
But what's the point when you're 62?
No,
I'm hoping when I'm 62 that I'll just chill out.
He doesn't.
No way.
He doesn't need the money either. He can just chill. Like,
no, he doesn't want to chill. He so doesn't want to chill. I tell you what, in Hollywood, because my husband's a film producer, in Hollywood, you know when they retire, they're either 90 or they're dead.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Now let's get the latest in the world of sport, specifically the controversial win of Algerian boxer Emin Khalif, who won the Olympic gold in a packed Roland Garros. Now the 25-year-old hit back at critics who said she should not have been allowed to participate in the games by saying, "I am a woman," after that historic win. Well, let's see what my panel make of this one. Author and commentator Nikki Hodgson and the broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon both still join me now. Nikki, I'll start with you. I mean, J.K. Rowling, a slew of women, Nicola Roberts, the former boxer who won in, 2012 here in London. They're all saying this is a damn outrage. I nearly swore there.
Travesty.
Yes, a travesty. It is way below the watershed right now. But a lot of people very vocal about this, very quite angry by it, and really saying that this is tantamount to allowing sport to allow those who are men to hit women. I mean, where are you on that?
It is so much more complicated than the media is portraying, for several reasons. This particular boxer has DSD. So it's a term that means differentiated sex differences. It's when somebody has a mixed range of indicators about their biological sex, right? And we define that in terms of chromosomes, hormones, genitals and reproductive organs. It's not one thing. Now, when we're taught biology in school, they just teach us it's chromosomes and genitals. When we're born, the doctors assign us our sex based on our genitals. But there are other factors. And most people don't know themselves what their range of chromosomes or hormones are, you know? So because of that, it isn't necessarily untrue that she is a woman, but we need to decide what the parameters are of biological sex. It's not about gender, this is about biological sex.
Yeah.
When it comes to thinking about, I don't know, a certain amount of prowess or a physical advantage over somebody else. I mean, there is an argument that says, well, the whole point of the Olympics is that some people have physical advantages over other people. They're just incredible specimens of humans. But I think we have to really talk about this in a nuanced way, and we have to decide what we're going to accept.
Well, the IOC came out and said that they couldn't differentiate between what the definition of a man and a woman actually is. And I thought, well, I'll do it for you for free. But the other discussion there is that the actual international body representing the sport itself, boxing itself, they, of course, banned it and said you cannot compete because you have an advantage, a physical advantage over women. Is that not the point, that we are putting women at risk here?
And it just shows that the IOC are quite a misogynistic organisation, in my view. And I take up a point that Nikki made. She said that most of us don't actually know biologically what we are. Well, we do, because men hold the XY chromosome and women have the XX chromosome.
But most people don't know about their hormones level.
But you mentioned hormones in the same breath as chromosomes. That's what you said. I just wanted to clarify that, because most of us do know if we're male or female. Also, BAFTA, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but BAFTA have actually sorted out the last 2 years of will they have just categories for an actor instead of actor and actress. Now, they've now stopped that. They've put a stop to that quite clearly, and very well, in my view. They've asked producers now to put forward votes for actors and actresses. So it's a male and female categorisation straight down the line. No one needs to be muddied, and we don't need nuance because we're dealing with facts, Nikki. Also, the boxing, Nicola Adams it was, and she said very vociferously she stands with Angela Carina, the Italian that was knocked out. Well, she wasn't knocked out. Took a big blow to the head within 46 seconds of being boxed, of being punched by Iman, who now has gone on to win the gold medal. I think it's an absolute abomination. And Nicola Adams has come from a very dark place to try and get women's sport, women's boxing, part of the Olympic Games. And if she says, oh gosh, this is awful, then I'm sorry. She's in the game. She knows all about it. I'll take her advice.
Then she did post on X, though, a follow-up saying this isn't about the trans issue.
No, because people with DSD are not trans.
No.
Yeah.
But what I would say is they do exist, and they make up to 2% of the population. That's 1 million people. Some of those people won't know themselves. And it is factually accurate to say that biological sex is made up of those 4 factors. You know, everybody, all the top scientists now at Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, all agree on that. That is scientific truth. Now, where you decide to draw the parameters is political, and that's different, and that's the conversation we need to have. But the facts are, it is not as simple as chromosomes and genitals.
OK. I mean, Claire, where are you at on that, then? Because, I mean, where do we actually draw the line? Because Sir Keir Starmer's not going to do it.
Well, he's clearly not. He doesn't. Remember, he forgot what a woman was.
Yes, 99% don't have a penis.
Exactly. Yeah, and David Lammy as well. Let's not forget him, the brilliant Foreign Secretary. I'm just so appalled that we're actually having conversations like this. That people are presenting in violent sports with the ability to hit women. And I think that is the basic of it all. That is the base of it all. And I'm not happy about it at all. No. I'm really not. No. It's not right. It's not fair. And it doesn't adhere to the Olympic elite of sporting events, in my view.
I mean, Nick, do you think that we've just gone sort of ideology mad, right? In that, you know, this has become... Maybe 10 years ago, we could have sat here and had a discussion about how we actually categorise people and what groups we put them in as far as sport's concerned. Sure. Now, though, it does become part of a discussion around sex-based rights and all these, which a lot of women feel are very much at threat.
Sure, and I completely understand that. I'm a feminist. I couldn't agree with that more about the need to protect women. I have a baby daughter. I think about that all the time. I think about male violence often because it worries me so much for her. But I just think that we've got to use the new science that we have to make a better judgment. And it'd be very easy to be quite cut and dry about it. You can decide a threshold. If we all decide that chromosomes are the factor, then that's fine. If that's what is decided.
Also male puberty and levels of testosterone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Allegedly, that's what Iman had gone through.
And that is also something that we talk about regularly in sport. Testosterone has long been an issue in deciding whether someone can compete or not. But I do object as well to the bullying that Khalif has received, you know, because there has been so much hate and it has overshadowed the gold medal.
OK, thank you very much. Two views there. Thank you very much for your time. That's Claire Muldoon there and Nikki Hodgson. Thank you to them. Now, coming up, protesters rally at a Stop the Far Right demonstration outside the London headquarters of Nigel Farage's Reform Party. We're live there with our national reporter after your headlines with Tatiana.
Darren, thank you. The top stories this hour. Police forces across the UK are on standby this weekend, with a Cabinet Office minister saying the government's in a state of high readiness for the prospect of further disorder. Protesters are out in their hundreds in Manchester at the moment, rallying against racism. No reports yet of any disorder there. Around 741 people have now been arrested over rioting. That's according to the National Police Chiefs Council, of which over 300 have now been charged. Merseyside Police says 2 more people have been charged today following violent disorder in Southport and Liverpool, bringing the total number of people charged there to 24. A Section 60 order is now in place for 12 hours in Liverpool city centre. Around 15,000 people are taking part in an anti-racism rally in Belfast following a week of unrest and disorder in the city there. The demonstration began at Writers' Square and made its way to City Hall, where speeches are currently taking place. A senior police service of Northern Ireland officer earlier promised a significant visible policing operation. Around 1,000 people gathered in Belfast for a counter-protest against several hundred anti-immigration demonstrators last night. His Majesty the King has called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country. He thanked the police and emergency services for their efforts to restore peace and welcomed how communities have countered the violence. This comes after the Prime Minister said the police should remain on high alert this weekend despite the violence easing. And up to 500 mourners have attended the funeral service of teenager Jay Slater, who, quote, touched the lives of so many people. The British teenager died whilst on holiday in Tenerife. Those who attended the service wore blue in his memory. A post-mortem examination found the 19-year-old died of traumatic head injuries consistent with a fall from height. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. Sam has your next headlines.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Cloudy for some in the south, but brighter in the north before turning hot and humid Sunday and into Monday. But having a look at the bigger picture, we've got this waving feature, and that's responsible for the cloud and outbreaks of rain that we'll see in the south today. A bit of a squeeze in the isobars further towards the north. So a lot of cloud compared to yesterday, especially across parts of Wales, the Midlands and down towards the south. Perhaps thick enough for some spots of rain and drizzle. But in the north, best of the sunshine here with sunny spells. Still a few showers coming into Scotland, but these moving through quite quickly in a brisk wind. Highs here of 20 degrees, but further south 24 to 25. Now, as we go into the latter half of the day, clouds should melt away, so we'll start seeing some late evening sunshine across parts of Wales and the Midlands, but holding on to a lot of cloud further towards the south. Still sunny spells into the evening across Northern Ireland, Northern England, and holding on to a few showers across parts of Scotland still, but like I said, they're moving through quite quickly. So through Saturday evening and into the night, that cloud still persisting across the southern parts of England, so a murky night here and also quite humid and muggy as well. Elsewhere, clearer skies developing widely, showers generally fading across much of Scotland and actually feeling quite fresh underneath the clear skies, especially in the rural spots further towards the north. But underneath this cloud and murky conditions, a humid feel, temperatures 16 or 17 degrees. So as we start Sunday morning then, a lot of clouds still persisting across the south, but as we go into the afternoon, that should start breaking up to reveal sunny spells. And for the majority of the UK, plenty of warm and hot sunshine on offer, with temperatures climbing up to 29 degrees. Bye-bye.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, Nana Akweer will be live on GB News from 3 p.m. and I'm delighted to say she's joined me in the studio now. Nana, what's coming up on your show?
Well, of course, we're going to be talking about the King calling for unity and kind of covering as much of the protest if there is much action across the country. Stay with us on GB News for that. Now, I'm also going to do my monologue, and my monologue is on Sadiq Khan, who says that he feels unsafe. And I'm thinking, well, welcome to my world in his London, his own London, because he says being a Muslim is the first time he's felt really unsafe there. But so we're going to sort of have a look into that as well. Obviously, nobody should feel unsafe, but surely he should be looking at the safety of all in London. It would be great now that if he could address a lot of that. Plus, I'm asking, are you having buyer's remorse after purchasing Sir Keir Starmer as your leader? It is beginning to feel a little bit like a dictatorship, but what do you think? We'll be discussing that. My brilliant guest is Dame Andrea Jenkins. She'll be in my big interview later on as well. So lots coming up.
Brilliant. Nana, we look forward to it. Thank you very much. That's Nana Akweer coming up at 3 o'clock with a jam-packed show. Now, right, folks, I'm going to go to gbnews.com/your say. And Sharon says, who is a member, thank you, Sharon, she says the only way to stop these men competing is all women refusing to compete. So actually in sport, Sharon wants to see women protesting against it by saying, I'm not going to participate. And Sharon, I guess that would be hard for people because let's not forget that these women, many of them have been doing it since childhood, right? Building themselves up to get to the level of competing with at Olympic level. And it's incredibly important that they're able to do so fairly and openly. And, well, Political Mess says, I object to the protest, which we're going to talk about in a second, being called anti-racism. Most people are not racist. They're just worried about our culture dying out. And I dare say, Political Mess, because that's what we're in, quite the political mess, that it's also a worry that is perfectly legitimate. I mean, we're seeing scenes on screen right now of the burning and all the rest of it. No one, I certainly don't condone that. I think it's absolutely awful, and there are working class men and women that have to ultimately go out and pick up the pieces and clean up the mess that people have made. But I tell you what I do understand. I understand the anger, the disenfranchised, and frankly, the disillusioned with the political process. And Sir Keir Starmer has continued to pour petrol on the flames, quite literally, that we're seeing on screen there, quite literally those flames burning. And I think he's done nothing to quash, to quell, and to actually heal a nation in a state of complete and utter disrepair. And Ian points out that in the anti-racism marches today, if we can call them that, what is noticeable is the lack of national flags, Ian says. Not one tricolour in Ireland or any flag of the British Isles around the UK. He says, I still can't fathom how British people are going along with it. Yeah? I mean, you know, an anti-racism on these marches, really? Some of the chants that they're making, really? I don't buy it. Anyway, folks, you're with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. Coming up, we're going to be discussing, we will go live, I promise you, to our national reporter as protesters gather outside, right outside of Nigel Farage's Reform Office in London. This is The Weekend on GB News. We're Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is a big old headache because we talk a lot about GP appointments, don't we? But certainly almost everyone I know struggles to see a dentist when they need one.
Yes.
You know the best time to go to a dentist? When? 2:30. 2:30.
That's actually quite good. It's better than my gags.
The guy that went into Goa, to India, to get his dental treatment, is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, so tell us about that. I mean, this is how desperate people are to get treatment now. So what's the story?
OK, the story is a guy couldn't get an appointment at the NHS, so he went all the way to Goa in India to get his dental appointment. Now, I think he probably just wanted to go on holiday, and he thought, I know, why don't I go on holiday to Goa and then get my teeth done? Look, people are travelling in their droves. There's whole aeroplanes full of people with medical tourists. Like in Turkey, you get a whole aeroplane with people with hair implants, things like that.
Well,
yeah. I was going to go to
turkey teeth, isn't it?
Turkey teeth.
Turkey teeth. Well, now we've got
that's when they strip the tooth down and you have these little pegs.
Yes, they strip them down. But in many cases, they strip them down far too low, so the nerve is exposed and it gets infected, and it's exposed to the elements. So you get infection in the tooth, and then you have to essentially take them all off. But by then, the infection spreads so far. I was getting my nails done the other day, which I don't do very often, and my nail technician said to me, "Is your dad still a dentist?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Please, can I have an emergency appointment? I went to Turkey and I got my teeth done, and now they look incredible, but I'm in so much pain. They're all infected." She had 15 taken out from the top and 12 from the bottom, and it's an absolute disaster. But this is what people are feeling like they have to do.
So medical tourism doesn't always work.
No, but it shows, doesn't it, Alex, that people can't get their teeth sorted here, so they go elsewhere. Listen, do you floss, by the way?
Don't floss.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Patrick reminds us we're going to talk about the rallies taking place today. Patrick says, what was not the first riot we saw in Leeds? Why has that been washed off of the mainstream media? It's a good question. Now, today, though, as I mentioned, dozens of anti-racism rallies are taking place, being held across the United Kingdom. It's as protesters are expected to hold a Stop the Far Right demonstration outside the London headquarters of Nigel Farage's Reform Party. Well, we're joined now by GB News' very own national reporter, Charlie Peters, to give us the latest outside of those headquarters. Charlie, take it away.
Well, it's a pretty significant gathering here, Dan, about 200 so far. A couple of buses going past, beeping their horns and getting plenty of support here at this pretty significant gathering, as I said. There's a broad range of people here at the Stand Up to Racism protests. We've seen placards from the Socialist Worker magazine, "Smash fascism and racism by any means necessary," on the front of a lot of those placards. I've been speaking to people here in the moments leading up to you coming to me, and people were saying that they were holding Farage accountable for what was going on. I'm going to just take you around the corner here. There's a swastika being thrown into a bin being held outside of Reform UK's offices here by groups, a broad range of groups, coalescing under the Stand Up to Racism banner. I spoke to a couple just now who said they were from the Marxist-Leninist Communist Party of Turkey. They've been working in Britain for the last year, so that's a slightly unique far-left representation at a protest outside of the leader of a British political party, you might say. Plenty of Palestinian flags here. We've got a flag in the far distance. I'm not sure if you can see it, just behind the tree there, which is Saoirse Don Palestine, which is an Irish pro-Palestinian group. Now, the man there told me he wasn't really formally aligned with the group, which perhaps was a useful thing to say, considering they held a commemoration in Dublin for Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, who was killed by Israel in a strike in Tehran just last week. So a broad group of representation here at this rally for Stand Up to Racism, and it comes across nationwide protests being organised by that group. We've seen protests in Manchester this morning, in Newcastle, where there have been some arrests of people. One man arrested on suspicion of bringing a hammer onto a march, with the police kind of siphoning through protesters there. Other gatherings in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, and also other parts of the country, including Birmingham. But the main focus, I think, is going to be in London now because of the nature of this protest, right outside Reform UK's London headquarters. When I spoke to them earlier today, Reform UK told me that no one's in the office today, so whoever they're shouting at won't hear them, but hopefully we'll be able to hear from a representative from Reform UK later today, and I'm sure they'll give their reaction to seeing swastikas being shown outside the office, associating perhaps Reform UK with the Nazis. And I've been to a few demonstrations over the last couple of weeks. In Aldershot on Wednesday night, people were chanting "Nazi scum off our streets," and as we've just shown those placards, "Smash fascism by any means necessary." One woman I spoke to earlier told me that she was holding Farage accountable for some of the rioting and disorder we'd seen in the week. She said that while some people had been charged and indeed very quickly sentenced for those crimes, she said that perhaps Nigel Farage should also face police prosecution for his involvement in her view, whipping up hatred. But of course, Mr Farage isn't here to defend himself against that claim, but I'm sure he would refute it very sternly indeed. Now, this protest expected to go on for at least a couple of hours. Broad groups here, and I think we've just started to hear some chanting on the stage that they have out in front. But this now, the protest outside Reform UK's London office, the pinnacle perhaps of the nationwide Stand Up to Racism protests taking place today in reaction to the violent disorder that we've seen across the country over the last fortnight. I wonder if I can get you some more pictures of this crowd. If we can just move closer in, you can see a better image of some of the placards on display here, some of the representation, some of the signs. "Down with the far right's nonsense, stop the hate, stop the poison, nice people welcome immigrants, and keep all our Muslim families safe," possibly in reaction to mosques being targeted by some protesters in Southport. But yeah, Darren, a pretty positive atmosphere here, despite the fact that they are clearly associating reform with Nazis by virtue of a swastika being thrown into a bin.
Yeah, an absolute outrageous assertion. And to be perfectly frank, Charlie, when it comes to those sorts of rallies and they call for the genocide of the Jews and all the rest of it, I don't think Nigel Farage should be taking any lectures from them. But that's just my view. We'll leave it there. Charlie Peters, thank you very much as ever. Susan writes in, excuse me, Susan says Farage didn't start the riots. In fact, just like all other parties, he condemned the thugs. So why are they protesting outside of the Reform Party headquarters? A good question, Susan. But we're going to get some showbiz news now, and we're delighted, as ever, to have the showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci with us now. Stephanie, the Olympics, who's actually expected for the closing ceremony of the Olympics?
Well, they're hoping for it to be a star-studded affair. Obviously, the opening ceremony drew a lot of controversy, a lot of criticism, so they're hoping to rectify that. We hear Tom Cruise, because it's going to be about the handover now. From Paris, we're now looking forward to 2028 for the Olympics in Los Angeles. So apparently he's going to be abseiling down the Stade de France. Wow. Apparently there's talk of of Taylor Swift performing as well. You know, she was due to do these 3 concerts in Vienna, which have now been cancelled. So there is talk she may be appearing. But then also there's other people like Snoop Dogg. He's been giving people a lot of comedy during the Olympics. Apparently he will be performing. So they're trying to make it a big Hollywood affair because you're kind of saying au revoir to Paris and hello to Los Angeles now.
Well, they sort of tried a hybrid of that, didn't they, with Lady Gaga and Celine Dion, who, of course, speaks perfectly fluent French.
Yeah.
But it all seemed to be... why was Lady Gaga not with an audience?
This is what people haven't understood, and I think this is what the artistic director, Thomas Dolly, he got severe criticism, received death threats, so now they're trying to make it as smooth as possible, because there's 2 things about the Olympics. It's your opening ceremony and your closing ceremony, which really goes down in history for a country, and because France has sort of got it wrong for the opening, they're trying to rectify it now.
Now, you touched on it there, the horrible terrorist threat that was... basically found out by the authorities in Vienna.
Absolutely.
And they said he wanted to do all kinds of things, unspeakable, horrible things to these young
3
women.
people involved.
Girls, not women.
Definitely.
And now, as a consequence, apparently ticket prices in Wembley, where Taylor Swift is performing, have gone down. Can people feel safe, do you think, Steph?
Well, you know, London Mayor Sadiq Khan is saying that the security will be beefed up. He's saying there's no intelligence showing that there will be any threats of terror, but it's more what's in the public's consciousness now. If you are going to see Taylor Swift in Wembley, it's just that feeling of feeling unsafe, and it's nothing to do with Taylor, because unfortunately for her, she's been caught up with this like she was with Southport as well. It's just her name's been associated with these terrible acts of terror. But the thing is, you've got people who've been dying to see Taylor Swift. They will pay an arm and a leg to go see her. So unfortunately, the show must go on, but people need to feel safe.
I agree with you, Steph. I wanted to talk about Katie Price.
Oh my gosh, we need to at some point.
I wanted to. I'm going to have to talk to you at the break. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Stephanie Tetchy there. You've been with me, though, Darren Grimes, on GB News. Thank you very much. Don't go anywhere. Plenty more coming up with Nana. See you next time.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News, a weather update from the Met Office. Some late evening sunny spells in the north, cloudier in the south, before turning hot and humid Sunday and more so into Monday. So looking at the bigger picture then, we've got this waving feature, and this is responsible for the areas of cloud today, but higher pressure situated towards the south. So through the rest of today then, that cloud should generally melt away, generally just staying along the southern coasts of England, so murky here. Elsewhere, clearer skies are developing, any showers across Scotland generally fading as we go through the night. So underneath the clear skies could turn quite chilly for some of us in rural spots, but underneath this cloud, a humid, uncomfortable night with some muggy conditions here. So to start Monday morning then, like I said, a lot of cloud around, especially across parts of Devon and Cornwall and along English coast, some low cloud here. Elsewhere, some sunny spells, perhaps turning a bit hazy with the sunshine across Northern Ireland and parts of Northern England as well. And across Scotland, sunny spells mixed with just a few showers still coming in from the west. So through the rest of Sunday, hopefully most of this cloud should start lifting and breaking, and that low cloud retreating back towards coastal areas. Elsewhere, many places seeing plenty of sunshine, showers fading across parts of Scotland as well. And for many of us, it is going to be a warm, if not very warm and humid day. Highs in the southeast up to 27, possibly even 29 degrees. So then as we go into Sunday afternoon and evening time, that cloud generally melting away, plenty of clear skies on offer, but notice low pressure out towards the west, and that could bring in a focus for some quite heavy thundery showers on Monday. Going to be feeling very hot as well, highs of up to 32 on Monday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on a chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.